A bullet tore through Clara Whitfield's side as she fled into the Wyoming wilderness, clutching stolen bank documents that could destroy her corrupt fiancé and get her killed. For 3 days she crawled through sage and stone, bleeding until she collapsed beside a creek, certain she'd die alone. Then rough hands lifted her, and a stranger's voice cut through the darkness. "Stay with me." That cowboy's whisper would become her lifeline, her battle cry, and finally, her vow. This is the story of how a bank teller and a rancher fought an outlaw gang, exposed a conspiracy, and found something worth dying for. Stay with me until the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning of April 14th, 1875, broke cold and clear over Redemption Creek, Wyoming territory. Clara Whitfield stood behind the teller's window at Redemption Creek Savings and Loan, her hands steady as she counted out bills for Mrs. Henderson, the widow who ran the boarding house on 3rd Street. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced above the polished oak counter. $28, $29, $30 even, Mrs. Henderson, Clara said, sliding the bills across with a practiced smile. The older woman's weathered face creased with gratitude. "You're a blessing, Miss Whitfield. Not many banks would extend credit to a widow." "You've never missed a payment," Clara replied warmly. "Your word is good as gold." As Mrs. Henderson tucked the money into her reticule, Clara caught Edward Gaines watching her from his office doorway. The bank manager, her fiancé, stood with his arms crossed, his handsome face unreadable. Something had changed in him over the past month. The warmth in his gray eyes had cooled to something harder, more calculating. Their engagement, announced with such fanfare at Christmas, now felt like a noose slowly tightening. Clara turned away, organizing her cash drawer with deliberate care. She'd been the first woman hired as a bank teller in Redemption Creek, a position that had scandalized half the town and inspired the other half. Her father, rest his soul, had taught her figures and bookkeeping before consumption took him 2 years prior. Edward had championed her hiring, calling her a modern woman for modern times. She'd thought it was love. Now she wondered if it had been something else entirely. The morning progressed with its usual rhythm. Ranchers deposited earnings from cattle sales. The miller withdrew funds for new equipment. Old Tom Crawley came in to argue about interest rates, as he did every Tuesday, and left grumbling as always. Clara handled each transaction with professional efficiency, her mind only half present. The other half was occupied with the ledger she'd discovered 3 weeks ago. She'd been working late, organizing files Edward had asked her to review. In the bottom drawer of his desk, left unlocked in his haste to meet with Mayor Tinsdale, she'd found a leather-bound book filled with entries in Edward's precise hand. At first, she'd thought nothing of it. Then she'd noticed the discrepancies. Loans recorded but never issued. Deposits that appeared in the main ledger but not in this hidden one. Transfers to accounts she didn't recognize. The numbers told a story of systematic theft, of funds siphoned away over months, perhaps years. The amounts were staggering, enough to buy a ranch or fund a political campaign or disappear to San Francisco and live like royalty. Enough to kill for if the thief were desperate. Clara had copied key pages when Edward was at lunch, her hands shaking as she transcribed figures into her own notebook. She'd hidden her notes in a hollowed-out copy of David Copperfield on her bookshelf at home. Every day since, she'd gone to the bank wondering if Edward knew, if he'd noticed the drawer had been disturbed, if today would be the day he confronted her. And every day, she'd wondered what she should do with the information. Report him to Sheriff Marlowe? Edward and the sheriff played cards every Thursday. Take the evidence to the territorial governor in Cheyenne? That was a 2-day ride through country where women didn't travel alone. Trust someone in town? Edward's charm had won him allies everywhere. Who would believe her accusations against Redemption Creek's most eligible bachelor, the man who'd brought modern banking practices to the frontier? "Clara." She startled at Edward's voice, so close behind her. He'd crossed the floor without her hearing, his footsteps silent on the polished wood. "Yes?" She kept her voice steady, professional. "I need you to go through the Hartley Ranch account this afternoon. They're applying for an extension on their mortgage. I want your assessment of their credit worthiness." "Of course." She met his eyes, seeing nothing in them but business. "I'll have a report ready by closing." "Good." He lingered, his gaze searching her face. You seem distracted lately. Is something troubling you? The question hung in the air between them. Clara forced a smile. Just tired. Mrs. Chen's baby has been colicky at night. The whole boarding house hears him. Edward nodded slowly. You should move out of that place. Once we're married, you'll have proper accommodations. Once we're married, Clara echoed, the words tasting like ash. She'd been putting off setting a date, making excuses about waiting until spring turned to summer, until her sister could travel from Kansas, until the new church was finished. Edward hadn't pressed, until recently. Now he mentioned marriage with increasing frequency, his patience wearing thin. I've been thinking, June, Edward said casually, leaning against the counter. The second Saturday. That gives us 2 months to prepare, time enough to have a proper ceremony. Clara's chest tightened. Edward, I thought we agreed. We've been engaged for 4 months, Clara. His tone remained pleasant, but something sharp glinted beneath it. People are beginning to talk. It's time we formalized our arrangement. Arrangement, not union, not marriage of hearts. The word choice struck her like a slap. Before she could respond, the bank's front door crashed open. 4 men strode in, and Clara's blood turned to ice. They wore dusters despite the mild weather, and their faces were hidden behind bandanas. The lead man, tall with cold blue eyes visible above the cloth, carried a Winchester rifle at his hip. His companions fanned out, covering the room with practiced efficiency. Nobody move! The leader's voice boomed through the suddenly silent space. This is a withdrawal, folks. The Blackwell gang is making a transaction. Blackwell. The name sent terror rippling through every person in the bank. Thomas Blackwell and his gang had terrorized Wyoming territory for 2 years, leaving a trail of burned ranches and shallow graves. They were wanted in 4 territories, with a reward of $5,000 on Blackwell's head alone. Clara's hands rose slowly, carefully. Behind her, she heard Edward's sharp intake of breath. Mr. Gaines! Blackwell's tone turned mockingly polite. Good to see you again, sir. I trust you have our payment ready? The words didn't make sense at first. Then they did, with terrible clarity. Edward stepped forward, his face pale but composed. Gentlemen, there's been a misunderstanding. Don't insult me, Eddie. Blackwell's rifle swung toward the office. We had a deal. Your embezzlement, our protection, the evidence delivered to me in exchange for your continued breathing. So where is it? Clara's mind raced. Edward hadn't just been stealing from the bank. He'd been working with the Blackwell gang, and the ledger she'd found, the evidence she'd copied, that was what they'd come for. Edward's gaze flicked to her, just for a second, long enough. The girl, Blackwell said softly, following Edward's look. The pretty teller knows something. Clara ran. She didn't think, didn't plan. Instinct drove her toward the back door, past the vault, through the narrow corridor where employees kept their coats. Behind her, someone shouted. A gun fired, deafening in the enclosed space. Wood splintered above her head. Her hands found the back door's handle. It opened onto an alley that reeked of garbage and old manure. Clara burst into the sunlight, her skirts tangled around her legs. She heard pounding footsteps behind her, more shouts from inside the bank. Another gunshot cracked through the air. Pain exploded along her left side, a line of fire that stole her breath. She stumbled, caught herself against a rain barrel, kept running. Blood spread warm and wet through her dress, but terror drove her forward. The alley opened onto a side street. Clara turned toward the edge of town, toward the open prairie that stretched endlessly to the north. Behind her, men's voices rose in pursuit. How many? 2? 3? She didn't look back to count. Mrs. Chen stood in her doorway, frozen in shock. Miss Clara, you're bleeding. Get inside, Clara gasped. Lock your doors. She ran past the last buildings, past the corrals and chicken coops that marked Redemption Creek's boundary. The ground rose into scrubland, sage and stones and scattered pine. Clara's lungs burned. Her side shrieked with every step. The wound wasn't deep, she could tell that much, but blood loss would kill her as surely as a bullet through the heart. Behind her, horses' hooves thundered. Clara veered left, into a ravine thick with juniper. The narrow space forced her to slow, but it would slow the horses too. She could hear them closing, hear men calling back and forth. She went into the trees, cut around the south side. Blackwell wants her alive. She's got the documents. Clara pressed deeper into the ravine, her breath coming in ragged sobs. The documents. They thought she'd taken the ledger from the bank. She hadn't. She'd left it in Edward's desk drawer, her own notes safely hidden at the boarding house. But they didn't know that. They'd hunt her until they found her, until they recovered what they believed she carried. The ravine opened into a meadow. Clara burst into the open, realized her mistake immediately. On horseback, they'd run her down in seconds. She needed cover, needed to disappear. A shot kicked up dirt at her feet. "Stop running, girl." The voice was closer than she'd thought. "There's nowhere to go." Clara spotted a creek ahead, its banks lined with cottonwoods. Water meant life. Water meant a trail to follow away from town. She angled toward it, her vision starting to blur at the edges. Blood soaked through her dress, dripping onto the ground with each stumbling step. She reached the creek and splashed into the shallows. The cold water shocked her system, bought her another minute of clarity. Downstream, the creek bent into dense willows. If she could reach them, maybe lose her pursuers in the tangles of branches and mud. Her foot caught on a submerged stone. Clara went down hard, her head striking a rock. Stars exploded across her vision. She tried to rise, but her limbs wouldn't obey. The water flowed around her, red with her blood, carrying it downstream like a banner. Hoofbeats thundered closer. "I see her! In the creek!" Clara's fingers dug into the muddy bank. She pulled herself halfway out of the water, but her strength was gone. The sky wheeled overhead, impossibly blue. She thought of her father, of the boarding house where her few possessions waited, of the life she'd never live. The horseman burst through the trees. Clara closed her eyes, waiting for the bullet that would end it. It didn't come. Instead, another sound cut through the air, different hoofbeats coming fast from the east. A man's voice rang out, sharp with authority. "You boys are on McAllister land. I suggest you turn around." Clara forced her eyes open. A lone rider sat his horse between her and the outlaws, his back to her. He wore a weathered Stetson and a canvas duster, and he held a Henry rifle with the casual confidence of someone who knew how to use it. "This ain't your business, cowboy," one of the outlaws snarled. "Woman bleeding in my creek? I'd say that's exactly my business." The stranger's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Now ride on out, before I make it permanent. There's 3 of us and 1 of you. Then 2 of you are going to die alongside the stupid one." The rifle shifted fractionally. "Your choice." The outlaws hesitated. Clara could see the calculation in their eyes. Was this wounded woman worth dying for? Could they take this stranger before he dropped at least one of them? "Blackwell won't like this," the leader finally said. "Thomas Blackwell knows where to find me if he's got complaints. McAllister Ranch, 5 miles north. You tell him Jack McAllister is ready whenever he wants to discuss property rights." The name seemed to mean something. The outlaws exchanged glances, then wheeled their horses around. Within seconds, they'd vanished into the trees, leaving only hoofprints and echoing curses. The stranger, Jack McAllister, dismounted in one fluid motion. He was tall, lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of coffee. Age was hard to pin down on men like him. He could have been 30 or 50, worn down and built back up by frontier life until only the essential parts remained. He knelt beside Clara, his hands surprisingly gentle as he examined her wound. "How long you been running?" I don't know." Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Bank robbery. They think I have documents. Do you?" The question was asked without judgment, just gathering information. Clara tried to shake her head, but even that small movement sent the world spinning. "Not with me. They'll keep looking. Then we'd better get you somewhere they won't find you." Jack's arm slid under her, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing. Clara cried out as the movement jostled her wound, fresh blood streaming through her fingers where she pressed against her side. "Sorry," Jack murmured. "I know it hurts, but we need to move quick. Can you hold on?" "I can't. I'm going to—" "Yes, you can." His voice was firm now, commanding. "Look at me. Look at me, miss." Clara forced her eyes to focus on his face. It was a hard face, carved by weather and hardship, but his eyes held unexpected kindness. "You're going to stay with me," Jack said, carrying her toward his horse. "You hear? Stay with me. He settled into the saddle with Clara cradled against his chest, then spurred his horse into a steady lope. Each stride sent jolts of agony through her body. Clara bit her lip until she tasted blood, trying not to scream. Where are you taking me? My cabin. It's remote. They won't find it unless they know where to look. Jack's arm tightened around her. We'll patch you up, then figure out what to do next. They'll come looking. Let them. There was steel in his voice now. Nobody hunts on my land without permission. They already learned that today. Clara wanted to protest, to tell him he didn't understand what he was facing. The Blackwell gang didn't respect property lines or single ranchers with rifles. They'd burn his cabin and hang him from his own rafters if they thought it necessary. But her vision was graying out again, consciousness slipping away like water through her fingers. Stay with me, Jack repeated, the words becoming a rhythm matching the horse's gait. Stay with me, miss. Don't you quit now. But darkness was pulling her down, soft and insistent. Clara felt herself sinking into it, her body going slack against Jack's chest. From very far away, she heard him calling to her. What's your name? Tell me your name. Clara, she managed. Clara Whitfield. All right, Clara Whitfield, you listen to me good. His voice was the last solid thing in a world turning to shadows. I'm taking you home. You're going to be safe there, but you have to stay with me. You understand? You have to stay with me. The words wrapped around her like a promise. Clara held on to them as consciousness fled, held on to the rough comfort of a stranger's voice telling her to live, to fight, to stay. The ride to the cabin blurred into fragments. Clara surfaced occasionally, caught glimpses of pine forests and rocky outcrops, felt the horse's movement beneath her. Each time she woke, Jack was there, his arm steady around her, his voice low and constant. That's it. Stay with me. We're almost there. You're doing fine, Clara. Just keep breathing. Don't you quit on me now. Come too far for that. When consciousness slipped away again, his words followed her into the dark, an anchor keeping her from drifting too far. The cabin materialized like something from a dream. It sat in a small valley surrounded by stands of aspen and pine, with a creek running nearby. Smoke curled from the stone chimney. A barn and corral stood to one side, several horses watching with mild interest as Jack rode up. He dismounted carefully, keeping Clara cradled against him, and kicked open the cabin door. Inside was simple but scrupulously clean. A stone fireplace, a table and chairs, a single bed against the far wall, shelves lined with books and supplies. The smell of wood smoke and coffee hung in the air. Jack carried Clara to the bed and laid her down as gently as he could. She cried out anyway, her body arching with pain. Blood had soaked through her dress, staining the front of Jack's shirt, where she'd been pressed against him. I know it hurts. He was already moving, pulling supplies from a cabinet. But I've got to look at it properly. Can you stay still for me? Clara managed a weak nod. Jack returned with a basin of water, clean cloths, a bottle of whiskey, and a leather roll that clinked with metal instruments. He set everything on a chair beside the bed, then paused, his hands hovering uncertainly. I need to... Your dress. Just do it, Clara whispered. Modesty seemed absurd when death was close enough to touch. Jack used a knife to cut away the blood-soaked fabric, working with practiced efficiency. When he peeled back the material, Clara got her first clear look at the wound. The bullet had torn a furrow along her left side just below her ribs, deep enough to bleed profusely, but, mercifully, not deep enough to have hit anything vital. You're lucky, Jack said, echoing her thoughts. Another inch and you'd be dead already. As it is, the wound's clean. Bullet didn't lodge. Main danger now is blood loss and infection. He poured whiskey directly onto the wound. Clara screamed, her back arching off the bed. Pain exploded through her entire body, white-hot and overwhelming. Jack's hand pressed her shoulder down, keeping her from thrashing. I'm sorry, but it's got to be done. He worked quickly after that, washing away blood and debris, his touch as gentle as his rough hands allowed. Clara drifted in and out of awareness, the pain too intense to hold on to consciousness. She heard herself making sounds, whimpers, gasps, broken words, but couldn't seem to stop. That's it, Jack murmured. Let it out. No shame in hurting. When the cleaning was done, he began stitching. Clara felt the pull and tug of the needle, but the pain had reached some threshold where more didn't matter. She stared at the ceiling beams, counting them, losing count, starting over. "Almost done," Jack said. "You're doing fine. Just stay with me." Those words again. Stay with me. They'd become a lifeline, something to hold on to when everything else was slipping away. Finally, blessedly, he tied off the last stitch and began wrapping her torso with clean bandages. Clara felt the pressure of the cloth, the slight relief it brought to the burning in her side. There. Jack sat back, wiping sweat from his forehead. His hands trembled slightly, delayed reaction to the stress of the procedure. "That's the best I can do. You've lost a lot of blood. Next few hours will tell the tale." Clara tried to speak, but only a whisper emerged. "Water." Jack held a tin cup to her lips, supporting her head with his other hand. The water was cold and sweet, tasting of mountain snow. Clara drank greedily until he pulled it away. "Easy. Not too fast or you'll sick it back up." He covered her with a quilt, tucking it around her shoulders. The simple domesticity of the gesture, so at odds with the violence of the day, made Clara's eyes sting with unshed tears. "Why?" she managed. "Why are you helping me?" Jack settled into the chair beside the bed, his expression thoughtful. "You want the practical answer or the honest one?" "Both." "Practical. Blackwell and his boys have been terrorizing this territory long enough. If you've got something they want, something that might bring them down, then helping you is helping everyone." He paused. "Honest answer. I don't like seeing folks hurt when I can do something about it, especially not women bleeding to death in my creek." "They'll come for me." "Probably." Jack showed no concern at the prospect. "But this cabin's defendable, and I'm a better shot than I might look." "You don't understand." Clara's voice was getting weaker, sleep or unconsciousness pulling at her. "It's not just the gang, the bank manager, Edward Gaines. He's been stealing, working with them. I found proof. He'll want me dead too." "Your fiancé?" Jack had noticed the ring on her finger, the small diamond that had once seemed like a promise of happiness. "Former fiancé?" Clara twisted the ring off with clumsy fingers and let it fall to the floor. The soft ping as it hit the boards felt like freedom. "Should have known something was wrong. Nobody changes that much unless they're hiding something dark." Jack picked up the ring, studied it in the lamplight. "You were going to marry him." "I thought I loved him. Thought he loved me." Clara's laugh came out bitter. "Turns out I was just convenient. First woman teller, gave him access to records he wouldn't normally see, made him look progressive and modern. Probably planned to kill me after the wedding, once he had what he needed. Some men are poison all the way through." Jack set the ring on the side table. "You're well rid of him." Clara's eyes were closing despite her efforts to keep them open. "The documents, my notes, they're hidden. At the boarding house, Mrs. Chen's place. In a hollowed-out book. David Copperfield, on the shelf. Don't worry about that now. Just rest." "You don't understand, sir," Clara insisted, fighting the darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. "Those notes could bring down half the corrupt officials in the territory. Bank examiner, mayor, territorial judge, all taking cuts. Edward documented everything in that ledger. He was careful about the crime but stupid about the record keeping." Jack leaned forward, his expression intense. "Clara, listen to me. You're in no shape to worry about this tonight. We'll sort it tomorrow, when you're stronger. Right now you need to rest. Promise me," Clara whispered. "Promise you'll get those documents if something happens to me. Don't let them get away with it." "I promise." Jack's hand found hers, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers with surprising gentleness. "But nothing's going to happen to you. You're going to heal up, and when you're strong enough, we'll figure out how to get that evidence to someone who can use it. The federal marshal in Cheyenne, we'll get it to him. But first you've got to get better." Jack squeezed her hand. "So stay with me, Clara Whitfield. You hear? Stay with me." The words were becoming a prayer, a promise, a command. Clara held on to them as sleep claimed her, pulling her down into darkness where pain couldn't quite follow. Her last conscious thought was that this stranger's voice, rough and kind in equal measure, was the most honest sound she'd heard in months. Fever came with the night. Jack sat in the chair beside Clara's bed, watching her toss and turn in delirium. Her skin burned with unnatural heat. She cried out in her sleep, calling names he didn't recognize, reliving horrors he could only imagine. He'd seen fever before, knew it for the serious threat it was. The wound could have been worse. The bullet had torn through muscle, but missed anything vital. But infection was always the greater danger, especially out here where doctors were scarce and medicine scarcer. Jack refreshed the cloth on her forehead every few minutes, trying to bring down the fever. He'd packed the wound with yarrow and golden seal, plants his mother had taught him about before consumption took her same as it took most folks on the frontier. The herbs would help fight infection, but the real battle would be fought in Clara's body, her strength pitted against the poison trying to take hold. "Edward, please," Clara murmured, her head rolling on the pillow. "Please don't. I never meant—" Jack's jaw tightened. He'd seen the ring, heard enough of the story to understand the betrayal she'd suffered. Bad enough to be shot and hunted. Worse still to have it done by someone she'd trusted, someone she'd planned to marry. He'd never understood men like that, men who saw people as tools to be used and discarded. Jack had grown up hard, lost family to disease and violence, learned early that the frontier gave no quarter to weakness. But his father had taught him something crucial before a horse kick ended his life. A man's measured by how he treats folks who can't fight back. Everything else is just posturing. Jack had tried to live by that, tried to build something decent on this patch of land, raising horses and cattle, helping neighbors when he could. It was a simple life, sometimes lonely, but honest, clean. Now that life was about to get complicated. "Stay with me," he murmured, wringing out the cloth and replacing it on Clara's burning forehead. "Come on, miss. Don't quit now." Near midnight, Clara's fever spiked. She thrashed violently, nearly falling from the bed. Jack caught her, held her steady, his arms bracketing her body without touching the wounded side. "Clara, Clara, look at me." Her eyes opened, but they were wild, unseeing. "They're coming. Edward, they're coming. We have to run." "You're safe. You're at my cabin. Nobody's getting to you here." "The money, all that money. How could you?" Her voice rose, edged with hysteria. "I loved you. I would have given you anything. Why did you have to steal?" Jack's heart clenched. She wasn't talking to him. She was somewhere else, sometime else, reliving the moment she'd discovered the truth about her fiancé. "Shh," he soothed, the way he'd calm a spooked horse. "It's all right. You're safe now." "Not safe. Never safe. They'll find me. They'll kill everyone who helped me." Her gaze seemed to focus on him suddenly, lucid for just a moment. "You should leave me. Save yourself." "Not a chance." Jack pressed the cloth to her forehead again, held it there. "I don't run from trouble, Clara, and I don't abandon folks who need help. Foolish, probably, but I've been called worse." A ghost of a smile flickered across her fevered face. Then her eyes rolled back and she slumped in his arms, consciousness fleeing again. Jack settled her back onto the bed, checked her bandages. Some blood had seeped through, but not much. The wound itself was holding. It was just the fever now, the infection trying to take hold. The next few hours would be critical. He built up the fire, heating water for more compresses. Outside, his dog started barking, a warning sound that made Jack's hand drop to the pistol on his hip. He moved to the window, peering through the darkness. 3 riders approached, moving slowly up the trail to his cabin. Jack's breath caught. Had the outlaws come back already? Were they fool enough to attack at night? Then the lead rider moved into the moonlight, and Jack recognized the hulking form of Hank Devlin, his neighbor from 5 miles east. The 2 men with him were Hank's sons, both strapping young men in their 20s. Jack opened the door before they could knock. "Hank, what brings you out at this hour?" The big rancher dismounted, his weathered face grim. "Heard there was trouble in town. Blackwell gang hit the bank, killed 2 people. Sheriff's forming a posse." His eyes moved past Jack to the bed where Clara lay. "Heard you might have picked up a passenger." News travels fast. Always does, especially bad news. Hank stepped inside, removing his hat. "That the teller? Miss Whitfield?" "That's her. Took a bullet in the side. She's fevered now." Hank moved closer, studying Clara with a practiced eye. Like most frontier folk, he'd dealt with his share of wounds and sickness. Seen worse pull through, but it'll be touch and go. I know it. Sheriff wants to question her, says she might have information about the robbery. Jack's eyes narrowed. Sheriff Marlowe? The one who plays cards with Edward Gaines every Thursday? The same. Hank's expression said he'd already considered that angle. I told him I'd ride out, see if the rumors were true. Bought you some time. Appreciate that. But Jack, Hank's voice dropped low. Blackwell's boys are saying you interfered with their business. That's not something they let slide. They were on my land chasing an injured woman. I interfered with that, sure enough. You know what I mean. They'll come back. Maybe with more men, maybe with Blackwell himself. Jack met his neighbor's eyes steadily. Then I'll deal with it when they do. You're one man, Jack. They're a gang of killers. One man's enough sometimes. Jack glanced at Clara, still lost in fever dreams. Besides, I gave my word I'd protect her. That means something. Hank sighed, but nodded. He understood about giving your word. You need help. You send one of my boys. We'll come running. Might take you up on that. See that you do. Hank settled his hat back on his head. Meanwhile, I'll tell the sheriff I couldn't find hide nor hair of the woman. That'll buy maybe a day before he comes looking himself. Gaines working with the gang? That's the word. Woman at the boarding house, Mrs. Chen. She says Miss Whitfield ran right past her, bleeding and calling out warnings. Says 3 men on horses chased her out of town. Hank's jaw tightened. Bank manager didn't even try to stop them. Just stood there watching. Jack's hands clenched into fists. He sent them after her. That'd be my guess. Whatever she knows, it's worth killing for. After Hank and his sons left, Jack returned to his vigil. The night stretched long and dark, broken only by the crack and pop of the fire. Clara's fever raged on, her body burning with heat one moment, shaking with chills the next. Jack covered her with quilts, then stripped them away when she burned, trying to keep her temperature regulated. Around 3 in the morning, she woke screaming. No, please, no, I don't have them, I don't... Jack caught her hands before she could tear at her bandages. Clara, wake up. You're safe. It's Jack. You're at my cabin, remember? Her eyes focused on him slowly, recognition dawning. Jack, the cowboy. That's right. You're safe here. Dreaming, she whispered. Such terrible dreams. Edward was there and the gang, and they were all laughing while... She shuddered, unable to finish. Just dreams. They can't hurt you. Clara's hand gripped his with surprising strength. Promise me something. What? If they find me, don't let them take me alive. Please. I've heard what Blackwell does to people who cross him. Jack's face hardened. Nobody's taking you anywhere, but if it comes to it... He reached under his pillow, pulled out a small derringer. This is loaded. You know how to use one? My father taught me. Then keep it close. For your peace of mind, if nothing else. Jack pressed the small pistol into her hand. But it won't come to that. I don't break my promises, Clara. And I promise to keep you safe. Why? The question seemed to hurt her as much as the wound in her side. You don't know me. Don't owe me anything. Why risk your life? Jack considered the question. I've been asking myself that. Maybe it's because I've seen too many folks die who didn't have to. Maybe it's because I lost my own family and couldn't do a damn thing to save them. Or maybe... He met her fevered eyes. Maybe it's because when I saw you bleeding in that creek, something in me said, this one lives. Not on my watch does this one die. Tears tracked down Claire's cheeks. I'm so scared. I know. Jack squeezed her hand. But fear just means you're alive. And as long as you're alive, there's a chance to make things right. The documents. Did I tell you about the documents? You did. Hollowed out David Copperfield at Mrs. Chen's boarding house. We have to get them before Edward thinks to search my room. We will, soon as you're strong enough to travel. Clara's laugh came out harsh. I can barely sit up. They'll have searched everything by morning. Then we'll figure something else out. Jack refreshed the cloth on her forehead. For now, you need to rest. Let your body heal. Jack? Yeah?
Thank you. The words were simple, but weighted with emotion. For everything. Thank me when we get through this. He smiled slightly. Now close your eyes and try to sleep. I'll be right here. Promise? Promise. Clara's eyes drifted shut, her breathing gradually evening out.
Jack settled back in his chair, the rifle across his knees, ready for whatever the remainder of the night might bring. Outside, an owl hooted. The fire crackled. The dogs made their rounds, their presence a comfort in the darkness. And through it all, Jack kept watch, his eyes on the woman in his bed and his ears tuned to every sound beyond the cabin walls. He'd given his word to protect her, and Jack McAllister had never broken his word yet. He wasn't about to start now. Dawn broke pale and cold, painting the valley in shades of gray and gold. Jack had dozed fitfully in his chair, snapping awake at every unusual sound. Clara's fever had finally broken around 5 in the morning, her temperature dropping back toward normal. She slept peacefully now, the lines of pain smoothed from her face. Jack stood and stretched, his back protesting after hours in the chair. He'd need coffee, strong and black, to face whatever this day brought. But first he checked Clara's bandages, relieved to find no fresh blood, no signs of infection taking hold. The herbs and whiskey had done their work. He was building up the fire when he heard horses approaching. Jack grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. 3 riders again, but these weren't Hank Devlin's sons. These men wore badges, and the lead rider's silver star marked him as Sheriff Marlowe himself. Jack stepped outside before they could dismount, his rifle held casually but ready. "Sheriff, you're a ways from town." Marlowe was a heavy-set man with a thick mustache and calculating eyes. He'd been sheriff for 5 years, re-elected easily each time with Edward Gaines's vocal support. Looking at him now, Jack wondered how many of those elections had been honest. "Morning, McAllister. Mind if we step down?" "Prefer you didn't. This is private property, and I'm particular about visitors." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "I'm investigating a crime, Jack. That gives me some latitude." "What crime would that be?" "Bank robbery, murder, and possibly kidnapping." Marlowe nodded toward the cabin. "Heard you might have Miss Whitfield in there." "You heard wrong." "That's so. Funny, because 3 of Blackwell's men swear you ran them off yesterday when they were chasing her, said you claimed she was on your property." "I ran off 3 armed men who were trespassing, that's true. Didn't stop to ask what they wanted or who they were chasing." "Jack," the sheriff's tone turned hard, "don't make this difficult. If you're harboring a fugitive—" "Fugitive?" Jack's voice cracked like a whip. "What's she accused of?" "Stealing from the bank, colluding with the Blackwell gang. Mr. Gaines says she's the one who gave them access to the vault." The lie was so brazen that Jack almost laughed. "That's some story. You believe it?" "I believe Edward Gaines, who's one of this town's most respected citizens, and I believe the evidence he's shown me, records indicating Miss Whitfield's been embezzling for months. Records that Gaines himself controls and could easily falsify." Marlowe's hand dropped to his pistol. "You're treading on thin ice, McAllister." "Am I? Or are you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're taking the word of a man who plays cards with you every week, who probably helps fund your campaigns, over a woman who can't defend herself." One of the deputies, a young man Jack didn't recognize, spoke up. "Sheriff, maybe we should just search the cabin. If she's not here, no harm done." "You got a warrant?" Jack asked mildly. "Don't need one for a fugitive." "But you do need probable cause, and you haven't established that." Jack's finger slid to his rifle's trigger. Not threatening, just ready. "So here's how this is going to work. You're going to ride back to town. You're going to tell Gaines that you searched high and low and found nothing, and you're going to forget you were ever here." "Or what?" Marlowe's voice dripped contempt. "Or I'm going to ride into Cheyenne myself, find the federal marshal, and tell him all about how the Redemption Creek sheriff is working with bank thieves and murderers. I'll tell him about the Blackwell gang operating freely in this territory while you look the other way. And I'll tell him to bring U.S. Marshals to investigate everyone from the bank manager to the mayor to you." The threat landed like a physical blow. Marlowe's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "You're making a big mistake, Jack." "Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. This is my land, Sheriff. Mine. and you've got no legal right to be here without a warrant, so ride on out before this gets ugly." The standoff lasted 30 seconds that felt like hours. Finally, Marlowe jerked his reins, turning his horse. "This isn't over." "Didn't think it would be." Jack watched them ride away, his rifle still ready. Only when they disappeared down the trail did he lower the weapon and return to the cabin. Clara was awake, propped up on one elbow despite the obvious pain it cost her. "I heard everything." "Then you know what we're up against." Jack set the rifle aside and moved to check her bandages. "How do you feel?" "Like I was shot, fell in a creek, and rode 5 miles on horseback." Her attempt at humor fell flat. "Jack, you just made an enemy of the sheriff." "Had worse enemies." "They'll come back with more men. They'll burn your cabin and arrest you for harboring a criminal." "Let them try." Jack's voice was flat, certain. "But we're not waiting for that. Soon as you can ride, we're heading for Cheyenne ourselves." "I can't ride. I can barely stand." "Then we've got maybe a day to get you stronger." Jack helped her sit up, supporting her back with pillows. "Think you can eat something? Broth? Maybe some bread?" "I'll try." While Jack prepared food, Clara studied her surroundings with clearer eyes than the night before. The cabin was simple but well maintained, a man's space, devoid of feminine touches but clean and organized. Books lined one shelf, a surprising number of them. She recognized Twain, Dickens, even some Shakespeare. A man who read was a man who thought, who questioned. That was dangerous on the frontier, where thinking too hard about your situation often led to despair. "Where'd you get all the books?" she asked as Jack brought her a bowl of beef broth. "Ma collected them. Said a frontier woman needed more than just survival skills." He smiled at the memory. "She taught me to read before I was 6. Insisted on it, even though Pa said ranching didn't require book learning." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. The past tense hung heavy between them. "Died when I was 15, consumption, like everyone else that winter." "I'm sorry." Jack shrugged, uncomfortable with sympathy. "Long time ago. Drink your broth." Clara sipped carefully, her stomach rebelling at first, then settling. The warm liquid spread through her, bringing strength she hadn't known she'd lost. "This is good." "Old recipe. Ma swore it could cure anything short of death." Let's hope she was right. Clara ate slowly, aware of Jack's eyes on her. He was watching for signs of weakness, she realized, trying to gauge whether she'd be able to travel when the time came. "I'm tougher than I look." "I believe it. Had to be tough to become a bank teller, I imagine. Can't have been easy being the first woman." "It wasn't." Clara set the empty bowl aside. "Half the town called me uppity. The other half called me worse. But I'd kept my father's books for years, knew I could do the work. When the previous teller left to try his luck at gold mining, I applied. Edward vouched for me." "Because you were convenient." "Yes." The admission hurt less than she'd expected. Maybe because the betrayal was still so fresh, her heart hadn't caught up to the reality yet. "I thought he was progressive. Thought he saw me as an equal." "What you thought doesn't matter now. What matters is what you do next." Clara met his eyes, seeing steel beneath the kindness. "What I do next is make sure Edward and everyone working with him pays for what they've done." "That's my girl." Jack's approval warmed her more than the broth. "Now rest. We've got planning to do." Over the next few hours, as Clara's strength slowly returned, they worked out a plan. Jack would ride to town after dark, sneak into Mrs. Chen's boarding house, and retrieve the hidden documents. With those in hand, they'd make for Cheyenne and the federal marshal's office. It was a 2-day ride in good conditions, longer with Clara injured. But if they could reach Cheyenne, they'd be under federal jurisdiction, beyond the reach of Marlowe and Gaines. "What if they're watching the boarding house?" Clara asked. "Then I'll find another way in. I've done some things in my time that required discretion." "You're talking about breaking the law." "I'm talking about getting evidence that'll bring down corrupt lawmen and murderers. Sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing." Jack's expression softened. "But if you're asking whether I've robbed or killed innocent folks, the answer's no. I've bent some rules, but I've got lines I don't cross." Clara believed him. There was something fundamentally decent about Jack McAllister, something that shone through despite the hard edges and careful distance he maintained. He was a man who'd been hurt, she sensed, hurt badly enough to withdraw from the world. Yet here he was, risking everything for a stranger. "Why are you really doing this, Jack?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I told you last night, something in me said you had to live." "That's not a complete answer." "Maybe not." Jack stood, moving to the window. "Truth is, I lost my wife and daughter 5 years back. Diphtheria. Took them in less than a week. I couldn't save them, couldn't do a damn thing but watch them die." His voice went rough. "Ever since, I've had trouble standing by when someone needs help. Maybe it's foolish. Maybe I'm trying to make up for not being able to save them. But that's how it is." Clara's chest tightened. "I didn't know. I'm sorry. Like I said, long time ago." But the way he said it told Clara the wounds were still raw. "Point is, I couldn't help them. But I can help you, so that's what I'm going to do." Before Clara could respond, the dog started barking again. Jack grabbed his rifle in one fluid motion, moving to the door. "Get down. Under the bed if you can manage it." Clara slid off the bed despite the pain, wedging herself into the narrow space beneath. From her hiding spot, she could see Jack's boots as he positioned himself by the window. "How many?" she whispered. "Can't tell yet. Stay quiet." Hoofbeats approached, multiple riders moving fast. Clara's hand found the derringer Jack had given her, her fingers wrapping around the grip. If this was the end, she wouldn't go easy. "McAllister!" a voice boomed across the yard. "Come out here. We need to talk." Jack moved to the door, rifle ready. "State your business." "It's Hank Devlin. Got news you need to hear." Jack cracked the door open, then swung it wide when he verified his neighbor's identity. "What happened?" Hank dismounted along with his 2 sons, all 3 looking grim. "Blackwell hit the Henderson Ranch an hour ago. Burned the barn, shot their foreman, left a message." "What message?" "They know you have the Whitfield woman. Said if you don't hand her over by noon tomorrow, they're burning every ranch from here to the creek. Said they'll start with mine, then work their way to yours." Clara felt ice form in her stomach. This was what she'd feared. Innocent people dragged into her fight, their homes and lives threatened because she'd stumbled into Jack's territory. "We can't let that happen," she said, crawling out from under the bed despite the pain it caused. "I have to go back." "Like hell you do." Jack's voice was flat, unarguable. "They'll kill people, Jack, burn their homes. And they'll kill you, slowly, painfully, after getting whatever information they want." Jack turned to Hank. "How many ranches between here and town?" 8, counting mine. "And how many men do those ranches have? Men who can shoot?" Hank's eyes widened as he understood. "Maybe 30. 35 if we include the older boys." "Think they'd ride with us? Against the Blackwell gang? That's asking a lot." "I'm asking because their homes are threatened either way. Blackwell doesn't make idle threats. He'll burn those ranches whether we give up Clara or not. Can't have witnesses. Can't leave people alive to testify against him." Jack's voice was hard, certain. "Only way to protect everyone is to take the fight to him." "You're talking about war." "I'm talking about survival. We've all bent our necks to that gang long enough, let them operate because we were too scared or too divided to stand together. Well, now they've forced our hand. We fight or we burn." Hank looked at his sons, then back at Jack. "You really think we can take them?" "I think we've got home ground, which counts for a lot. And I think 30-odd ranchers fighting for their homes and families are worth more than 50 outlaws fighting for money." Jack's smile was sharp, predatory. "Besides, I've got a plan." The plan came together over the next hour. Hank would ride to the neighboring ranches, calling in every able-bodied man. They'd meet at sunrise at Coleman's Pass, a narrow canyon on the road to Cheyenne. If they could lure Blackwell's gang into the pass, the high ground would let them turn the gang's numbers against them. "It's a risk," Hank warned. "If they don't take the bait, they'll take it," Jack said grimly. "Because Clara and I are riding for Cheyenne at dawn, with her carrying the documents that can destroy their entire operation. Blackwell can't let us reach the federal marshal. He'll have no choice but to come after us." "You're using yourself as bait." Clara's voice was hollow. "Using me." "Using both of us, yeah. But with 30 rifles waiting in the rocks above, it won't be suicide. It'll be an ambush. People will die. People are dying anyway. Jack met her eyes steadily. At least this way we choose the ground. And if we win, when we win, this territory will finally be free of Blackwell and everyone working with him. Clara wanted to argue, to find some other solution that didn't risk so many lives, but she couldn't. Jack was right. Blackwell had forced this confrontation, and the only way out was through. "All right," she said quietly. "What do you need me to do?" "Heal as much as you can in the next 12 hours. Sit a horse without falling off, and hold on to those documents like your life depends on it, because all our lives do." After Hank left to spread the word, Jack helped Clara back to bed. Her wound had started bleeding again from the movement, fresh red seeping through the bandages. She bit her lip as Jack changed them, unwilling to show how much it hurt. "You're doing good," Jack murmured, his hands gentle despite their roughness. "Better than most men I've seen take bullets. Had good reason to stay conscious." "That you did." He secured the final bandage, then met her eyes. "Clara, I need you to understand something. What we're doing tomorrow, it's dangerous as hell. There's a good chance we don't make it through." "I know. If things go wrong, if they get past our people and come for us in the pass, I'll do everything I can to protect you. But if it looks like they're going to take you alive," he pressed the derringer into her hand again. "You saved the last bullet for yourself. You understand?" Clara looked at the small gun, its weight suddenly immense. "I understand. I'm sorry to put that on you, but I've seen what Blackwell does to folks who cross him. Death would be mercy compared to that." "I said I understand, Jack." Clara's voice was steady. "And I'm grateful for everything you've done, everything you're risking. Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you." Jack started to reply, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. Instead, he squeezed her hand briefly, then stood and moved to the door. "Where are you going?" "Town. Gotta get those documents before tonight. The more time Gaines has to search your room, the more likely he'll find them. It's too dangerous. Marlowe will be watching for you. Marlowe's got bigger problems right now. Whole town's probably in chaos after the robbery." Jack checked his pistol, then strapped it on. "I'll be back before dark. You rest, stay hidden, and don't open this door for anyone but me. And if you don't come back, then you wait until full dark tomorrow. Take my best horse and ride like hell for Cheyenne. Stick to the creek beds. Avoid the roads. The horse knows the way. He'll get you there." Jack paused in the doorway. "But I'm coming back, Clara. I promise to keep you safe, and I keep my promises." He was gone before she could say anything else. The sound of hoofbeats fading into the afternoon. Clara lay back on the bed, exhaustion pulling at her despite her fear. Tomorrow they would ride into an ambush, would bet everything on Jack's plan working perfectly. Tomorrow, she might die. But if she did, at least it would be fighting, trying to make things right. And if she lived, if by some miracle they all lived, then maybe there'd be a future worth having. A future where corrupt bankers faced justice. Where gang violence was answered with community strength. Where a woman could do honest work without being used as a pawn. Where a wounded teller and a lonely rancher might find something unexpected in the midst of violence and betrayal. Something like hope. Clara closed her eyes, Jack's words echoing in her mind like a promise, like a prayer. "Stay with me." She would. For as long as she could, through whatever came next, she would stay. The afternoon sun slanted through the cabin's single window, casting long shadows across the rough-hewn floor. Clara dozed fitfully, her body demanding rest, even as her mind churned with worry. Every creak of the timbers made her start, every distant sound conjuring images of riders approaching with guns drawn. The derringer lay cold against her palm beneath the quilt, a final insurance policy she prayed she'd never need to use. She woke to the sound of hoofbeats returning just as dusk painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Clara's hand tightened on the small pistol until she heard Jack's voice outside, speaking low to his dogs. Relief flooded through her so intensely it left her breathless. The door swung open and Jack stepped inside, his saddlebags heavy over one shoulder. Dirt streaked his face, and his eyes held the wary alertness of a man who'd just walked through enemy territory. But when he saw Clara awake and watching, his expression softened fractionally. "You got him," Clara said, not quite a question. Jack nodded, crossing to the table and emptying the saddlebags with deliberate care. A worn copy of David Copperfield tumbled out, followed by Clara's few personal belongings: a hairbrush, a cameo that had been her mother's, a daguerreotype of her father in his Sunday best. But it was the book that mattered. The book with pages carefully cut away to create a hollow space where Clara's transcribed notes lay folded tight. "Mrs. Chen nearly shot me," Jack said, allowing himself a brief smile. "Came through the window and she was standing there with a shotgun pointed at my chest. Took some fast talking to convince her I was there to help you." "Is she all right? Did anyone see you?" "She's fine. Scared, but safe. And no, I don't think anyone saw. Town's in an uproar. Gaines has Marlowe's deputies searching every building, claiming you stole thousands from the bank." Jack's expression darkened. "They've put a $500 reward on your head, dead or alive." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. $500 was a fortune, more than most men earned in 2 years. With that kind of money at stake, every bounty hunter and desperate drifter in the territory would be looking for her. "Then we're not just running from the gang," she said quietly. "We're running from everyone. Which is why we stick to the plan. Get to Cheyenne, get those documents to the federal marshal, and let him sort out who's guilty and who's innocent." Jack moved to her side, checking her bandages with practiced efficiency. "How's the pain?" "Manageable." It wasn't quite, but Clara had learned that complaining changed nothing. "I can ride if I have to." "You'll have to. Sun up tomorrow, we leave for Coleman's Pass." Jack's hand stilled on the bandage he was rewrapping. "Clara, I need to be straight with you about what we're facing. Even with 30 men in those rocks, this is going to be ugly. The Blackwell gang doesn't surrender, doesn't retreat. They'll fight until they're dead, or we are." "I know. And if something happens to me, don't." Claire's voice was sharper than she'd intended. "Don't talk like you're already dead. We're going to get through this." Jack's eyes searched her face, and something flickered in their depths. Surprise, perhaps, or gratitude. "You've got more steel in you than most men I've known. Had to develop it fast working in that bank. You'd be amazed how many men think a woman can't count money or understand interest rates." Clara managed a weak smile. "Though I suppose embezzlement and murder are a bit beyond my usual challenges." "Just a bit." Jack finished with the bandages and helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her back. "Mrs. Chen sent food, said to tell you she's praying for you." He unpacked a bundle wrapped in cloth, cold chicken, fresh bread, even a small jar of preserves. The simple kindness of it brought tears to Clara's eyes. Mrs. Chen had so little, yet she'd shared what she had, sent comfort to a woman the whole town now considered a criminal. They ate in companionable silence as darkness settled fully outside. Jack had lit a single lamp, keeping it low so its glow wouldn't be visible from a distance. Every few minutes his eyes would flick to the window, checking, always checking. The vigilance never wavered. "Tell me about your wife," Clara said suddenly. "If you want to, I mean. You don't have to." Jack was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, softly, "Her name was Sarah. Met her at a church social in Cheyenne when I was 23. She was the minister's daughter, pretty as a picture and twice as smart. Everyone said she was too good for a rough rancher like me. But she married you anyway." "Year later, despite her father's objections. We built this cabin together. Well, I built it. She supervised and corrected my mistakes." The memory brought a ghost of a smile to Jack's weathered face. She had opinions about everything. The placement of windows, the size of the fireplace, even which trees to plant near the door. Drove me half crazy with her perfectionism. "You loved it. Every minute of it." Jack's voice went rough. "We had 3 good years. Then Emma came along, our daughter. Sarah nearly died bringing her into the world, but once she held that baby, all the pain was forgotten. Emma had her mother's eyes, bright as stars. She was walking before she turned 1, talking soon after. Sarah used to say she'd grow up to be president, the way she bossed everyone around." Clara heard the past tense, knew what was coming, but let him tell it at his own pace. "Diphtheria outbreak swept through the territory in the winter of 70. We were isolated out here, thought we'd be safe. But I'd gone to town for supplies, must have brought it back with me." Jack's hands clenched into fists. "Emma got sick first. High fever, trouble breathing. Then Sarah caught it trying to nurse her. I rode for the doctor, but he couldn't come. Too many sick, too few doctors. By the time I got back, Emma was gone. Sarah held on for 2 more days, just long enough to tell me it wasn't my fault, that she loved me, that I should find a way to keep living. Jack, I'm so sorry. I buried them on the hill behind the cabin, under the aspen Sarah loved. Spent the next year drinking myself halfway to death, let the ranch go to hell. Would have sold it and left if Hank hadn't dragged me out of my misery, literally, threw me in the creek and told me Sarah would be ashamed of what I'd become. He was a good friend. Best I've got. He helped me rebuild, get the ranch working again. But I couldn't open myself up like that again. Kept people at arm's length. Told myself it was better to be alone than to risk that kind of loss. Jack met Clara's eyes, and she saw raw honesty there. Until yesterday, when I found you bleeding in my creek, and something in me refused to let you die. Maybe it's foolish. Maybe I'm setting myself up for more grief, but I couldn't right away. Clara reached out, her hand finding his. It's not foolish. It's human. It's what makes us worth saving. Jack's fingers curled around hers, calloused and strong. They sat like that for a long moment, two damaged people finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. We should sleep, Jack finally said, though he didn't pull his hand away. Dawn comes early and we've got a hard ride ahead. Where will you sleep? Floor's fine. I've slept in worse places. That's ridiculous. This is your bed in your cabin. I'm the intruder. You're injured. You need the bed. Clara knew arguing would be pointless. She could see the stubborn set to his jaw, but guilt gnawed at her anyway. This man had given up his bed, his safety, possibly his life for her. The debt was overwhelming. Jack spread blankets on the floor near the fireplace and settled in with his rifle close at hand. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into the light sleep of a man accustomed to danger, ready to wake at the slightest disturbance. Clara lay awake longer, listening to the night sounds beyond the cabin walls. Somewhere out there, the Blackwell gang was planning their attack. Edward Gaines was scheming to cover his crimes. And tomorrow, all of it would come to a head in a narrow canyon where the odds of survival were far from certain. She thought about her father, wondered what he'd make of the situation she'd found herself in. He'd always taught her to stand up for what was right, to use her intelligence and education to make the world a better place. Would he be proud that she'd uncovered corruption, or horrified that her discovery had led to violence and bloodshed? Clara's fingers brushed the hidden documents beside the bed. These pages represented months of meticulous thievery by Edward Gaines, systematic looting of the bank's deposits. The amounts were staggering, over $20,000 siphoned away through false loans and phantom accounts. Enough to ruin families, destroy livelihoods, fund a small army of outlaws. Edward had been so careful, so methodical. He'd never taken large amounts at once, had always covered his tracks with convincing paperwork. If Clara hadn't been looking in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, she'd never have discovered it. And if she'd been just a little less brave or a little more trusting, she might have married him, might have become complicit in his crimes through ignorance. The thought made her stomach turn. Clara must have eventually slept, because she woke to gray pre-dawn light filtering through the window and the smell of coffee brewing. Jack was already up, moving with quiet efficiency as he prepared for the day ahead. He'd shaved, she noticed, and changed into clean clothes, dark trousers and a worn leather vest over a gray shirt. His gun belt sat low on his hips, the holster positioned for a fast draw. He looked like what he was, a man preparing for war. "Morning," Jack said when he noticed her watching. "How's the pain?" "Bad," Clara admitted, seeing no point in lying. "But not unbearable. I can ride." "That's what I needed to hear." Jack brought her coffee, strong and bitter and exactly what she needed. "We leave in an hour. Hank and his boys will be at Coleman's Pass by mid-morning, getting into position. We need to time it so we're riding through just as Blackwell's gang gets there." "What if they don't follow us? What if they split up, send some men after us and some to attack the ranches?" "They won't. I'm counting on Blackwell's pride. He'll want to be there personally when they catch us, want to make an example, and he won't risk dividing his forces when he knows we're carrying evidence that could destroy his entire operation." Jack's expression was grim. "Everything depends on him taking the bait." "No pressure then." Jack's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Get dressed. I'll saddle the horses."
Dressing was agony. Every movement pulled at Clara's stitches, sent fresh waves of pain radiating through her torso. She'd brought a split riding skirt from the saddlebags, practical clothing that would serve better than a dress for hard riding. Getting into it required gritted teeth and stubborn determination, but eventually she managed. When she emerged from the cabin, pale but upright, Jack was waiting with 2 horses. One was his own mount, a rangy bay gelding. The other was a gray mare with kind eyes and a patient disposition. "That's Smoke," Jack said, nodding to the mare. "Steadiest horse I've got. She'll take care of you even if you can't hold on tight." "I can hold on." "I know you can, but it's good to have insurance." Jack helped her mount, his hand steadying her as she swung carefully into the saddle. The movement tore a gasp from her throat despite her efforts to stay silent. Jack's jaw tightened. "Last chance to back out. I can hide you somewhere, make the ride alone." "No," Claire's voice was iron. "Those are my documents, my discovery. I'm seeing this through." Jack studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right then, let's ride." They left as the sun was breaking over the eastern mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. Clara looked back once at the cabin, this place that had been her sanctuary for barely a day, and wondered if she'd ever see it again. The ride to Coleman's Pass took 3 hours at an easy pace. Jack kept them to game trails and creek beds, avoiding the main road where they might be spotted. Every few minutes he'd stop, listening, checking their back trail for signs of pursuit. "How did you learn all this?" Clara asked during one such stop. "The tracking, the caution, this isn't ranch work. Spent some time in the Army before I met Sarah. Cavalry, chasing Cheyenne raiders up in Montana territory. Learned quick that the man who pays attention lives longer than the man who doesn't." Jack's eyes scanned the landscape with practiced efficiency. "Those skills came back when I needed them." They rode on, the sun climbing higher, the day warming into something almost pleasant. If not for the pain in Clara's side and the dread coiling in her stomach, it might have been a lovely morning ride. As they approached Coleman's Pass from the south, Jack suddenly reined in his horse. "Someone's following us." Clara's hand dropped to the rifle Jack had secured to her saddle. "How many?" "Can't tell yet, but they're staying back, trying not to be seen." Jack's expression was thoughtful. Could be Blackwell's scouts, or could be something else. They continued more slowly now, Jack's vigilance increasing with each passing minute. The pass itself was a natural bottleneck, high rock walls on either side, a narrow trail winding through the center. Perfect for an ambush, which was exactly why they'd chosen it. "Hank should be up there," Jack said quietly, nodding toward the cliff tops. "Him and 30 rifles, but I won't know for sure until—" A bird call echoed from the rocks above, 2 short notes followed by a longer trill. Jack's shoulders relaxed fractionally. "That's Hank's signal. They're in position." He glanced at Clara. "How you holding up?" "Still breathing?" Which was true, though barely. The ride had reopened her wound slightly, fresh blood seeping warm beneath the bandages. She could feel her strength draining with each passing mile, but she'd be damned if she'd admit it. They entered the pass, and Clara's sense of vulnerability spiked. The rock walls seemed to close in around them, creating shadows that could hide anything. Every boulder might conceal a gunman, every crevice might harbor death. "Easy," Jack murmured, sensing her tension. "Hank's men have the high ground. Anyone tries to ambush us, they'll get a nasty surprise." They were halfway through when Clara heard it, the thunder of approaching hoofbeats from behind, coming fast and hard. Jack heard it too, his hand moving to his rifle. "Here we go," he said quietly. "Remember the plan. We ride hard for the north exit. Don't stop, don't look back, no matter what you hear. Understand?" "I understand." "And Clara?" Jack's eyes met hers, intense and urgent. "If I fall, you keep riding. Don't stop for me, don't try to help. You get to Cheyenne and you deliver those documents. That's the mission." "Jack, promise me." Clara's throat tightened, but she nodded. "I promise." The riders burst into the pass behind them. 8 men, maybe 10, spread across the width of the trail. Even at a distance, Clara recognized the lead rider's cold blue eyes above his bandana. Thomas Blackwell himself had come for them. "Ride!" Jack's shout echoed off the canyon walls as he spurred his horse forward. Clara kicked Smoke into a gallop, the mare responding instantly.
Behind them, guns erupted in a cacophony of violence. Bullets whined off the rocks, kicking up dust and stone chips. Clara bent low over Smoke's neck, making herself as small a target as possible. Then the ambush was sprung. Rifles cracked from the cliffs above, a devastating volley that tore into the pursuing riders. Men screamed, horses went down thrashing. The narrow pass had become a killing ground, just as Jack had planned. But Blackwell's gang was experienced, hardened by years of violence. They didn't panic. Half of them wheeled their horses around, taking cover behind boulders and returning fire at the cliff tops. The other half kept coming, determined to run down their prey even as their companions fell. "Keep going," Jack shouted over the roar of gunfire. Clara did, though every instinct screamed at her to stop, to help, to do something besides flee. The north exit was visible ahead, a slice of daylight promising escape. They were going to make it. They were actually going to. A bullet caught Smoke in the shoulder. The mare stumbled, her front legs buckling. Clara felt herself flying forward as the horse went down, had one eternal moment to realize she was about to hit the ground hard. Then impact drove the breath from her lungs, sent her rolling across sharp stones. Her wounded side exploded with agony so intense the world went white. When her vision cleared, she was lying on her back, staring up at the strip of blue sky visible between the canyon walls. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The documents were still clutched in one hand, miraculously unscathed despite her fall. Hoofbeats pounded closer. "Clara!" Jack was suddenly there, dismounting at a run. His hands found her shoulders, his face appearing above her. "Clara, talk to me." "Can you move?" She managed a gasp, air finally flooding back into her lungs. "The horse. Smoke's down. Can't be helped." Jack was already pulling her up, ignoring her cry of pain. "Can you run?" "I don't know. More gunfire erupted, closer now. One of Blackwell's men had made it past the ambush, was bearing down on them with his pistol drawn. Jack's hand moved in a blur, his own gun clearing leather and barking once. The rider toppled from his saddle, dead before he hit the ground. "Run!" Jack grabbed Clara's arm, half dragging her toward the pass exit. Behind them, the battle raged on, Hank's men firing from above, the gang returning fire and trying to advance, a chaos of violence and death. Clara ran, though every step felt like knives in her side. Blood soaked through her clothes, leaving a trail behind her. Her vision blurred and darkened at the edges, but Jack's hand on her arm kept her moving, kept her focused. They burst out of the north exit, and Jack pushed Clara toward a cluster of boulders. "Get down. Stay hidden. Don't come out until I come for you." "Where are you going?" "Back to help finish this." Jack pressed his pistol into her hand, keeping only his rifle. "You've still got the Derringer. Between the two, you've got 9 shots. Make them count if anyone finds you." "Jack, no, you can't." "I can and I will. Those are my friends up there dying to protect us. I won't hide while they fight." Jack's hand cupped her face, rough and warm. "Stay alive, Clara Whitfield. That's an order." Then he was gone, running back into the pass with his rifle at ready. Clara pressed herself into the rocks, clutching the documents and the guns, listening to the battle rage just out of sight. She could hear individual shots now, the distinct crack of different rifles. Could hear men shouting orders, screaming in pain, cursing as they fought and died. Time became elastic, meaningless. The battle could have lasted 10 minutes or 10 hours. Clara had no way to judge. All she could do was wait, bleeding and terrified, while men killed each other over her discovery. Finally, gradually, the gunfire began to taper off. Individual shots instead of continuous volleys, long silences between reports. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Who had won? Was Jack alive? Should she risk moving or stay hidden as ordered? Footsteps approached her hiding place, slow and deliberate. Clara raised the pistol with shaking hands, sighting down the barrel at the gap between boulders. A figure appeared and Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. Then she recognized the weathered hat, the canvas duster. "Don't shoot," Jack said tiredly. "It's over." Clara lowered the gun, relief so intense it left her weak. "You're alive." "More or less." Jack moved closer, and Clara saw blood on his left shoulder, more blood on his vest. But he was walking, talking, alive. "Blackwell's gang is finished, killed 8 of them, captured the rest. Blackwell himself is dead. Hank put a bullet through his heart. And your men. Jack's expression darkened. We lost 4. Another 6 wounded. Could have been worse, but he trailed off, the weight of those losses evident in every line of his body. Clara struggled to her feet, swaying as the world tilted. Jack caught her instantly, his good arm wrapping around her waist. Easy, you're bleeding bad. I'll live. Clara pressed the documents into his hand. We won, Jack. We actually won. Jack looked at Clara. You stay here. Rest while you can. No. Clara's voice was stronger than she felt. Marlowe's working with Gaines. He'll arrest everyone, confiscate the documents, and we'll all end up dead in our cells. I'm coming with you. Jack looked ready to argue, then saw the steel in her eyes and nodded. All right, but stay behind me. They walked back into the past together, Clara leaning heavily on Jack's good arm. The scene that greeted them was chaos. Wounded men being tended, dead outlaws being searched, horses milling nervously. And in the center of it all stood Sheriff Marlowe with his deputies, their guns drawn and pointed at Hank's men. There you are, McAllister, Marlowe called out. I'm placing you under arrest for murder, interference with a criminal investigation, and harboring a fugitive. That fugitive would be me, Clara said, stepping around Jack. And I'm not a fugitive, Sheriff. I'm a witness to a crime. Multiple crimes, actually. Marlowe's eyes narrowed. Miss Whitfield, how kind of you to survive. Mr. Gaines will be so disappointed. I'm sure he will. Clara held up the documents, her hand surprisingly steady. These papers prove Edward Gaines embezzled over $20,000 from the bank and worked with the Blackwell gang to cover it up. They also implicate you, Sheriff, along with Mayor Tinsdale and Judge Blackburn. Dates, amounts, names, it's all here. Those are bank documents, Marlowe said smoothly. Stolen property. I'll be confiscating them as evidence. No, Sheriff, you won't. A new voice cut through the tension, deep and authoritative. Everyone turned to see a tall man in a long coat approaching from the south end of the pass. He wore a silver star on his chest, not a local sheriff's badge, but a U.S. Marshal's star. Behind him rode 4 more men, all armed, all wearing the same federal authority. I'm Marshal James Thornton out of Cheyenne, the man announced, and I've been investigating corruption in Redemption Creek for the past 6 months. I believe the young lady has evidence pertinent to my investigation. Marlowe's face went pale. Marshal Thornton, I didn't know you were in the area. Clearly. Thornton's gaze swept across the scene, taking in the dead outlaws, the wounded ranchers, the standoff. Looks like I arrived just in time. Sheriff Marlowe, I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and complicity in murder. You'll surrender your weapon and badge, please. This is outrageous. I'm the duly elected. You're a criminal. Thornton's voice cracked like a whip. And you'll hang for it. Deputies, you can choose to be part of the problem or part of the solution. Those who stand down now will be given consideration. Those who don't will share the sheriff's cell. The deputies looked at each other, then slowly lowered their weapons. One by one they dismounted, hands raised in surrender. Marlowe stood alone, his face twisted with rage and fear. This isn't over, he snarled. Edward Gaines has connections. Territorial governor, banking regulators, people who will make your life hell if you pursue this. Then I guess I'll be having a conversation with the governor next. Thornton nodded to his men, who moved forward to disarm and restrain the sheriff. Then he approached Clara, his expression softening slightly. Miss Whitfield, I presume. I've been trying to find you for 2 days. Mrs. Chen sent word you'd been shot. I'm glad to see you on your feet. Clara swayed slightly, the adrenaline that had sustained her finally burning out. The documents, they're all here. Everything you need to prosecute Gaines and his accomplices. I'll take those, thank you, and I'll need a full statement from you when you're recovered. Thornton's eyes moved to Jack, taking in the blood, the protective way he stood beside Clara. You must be McAllister. Mrs. Chen spoke highly of you, said you saved Miss Whitfield's life. Just did what needed doing. Then you have my gratitude, sir, and the gratitude of everyone who's suffered under Gaines's corruption. Thornton looked around at the assembled ranchers. As for the rest of you, I see dead outlaws and wounded citizens defending their homes. Far as I'm concerned, that's justifiable action against a criminal gang. Anyone who says different will have to go through me. Relief rippled through the group. Hank stepped forward, his voice gruff with emotion. Some of our boys didn't make it, Marshal. Good men, with families. The Blackwell gang needs to pay for that. And they will. The ones who survived will stand trial for murder, robbery, and a dozen other charges. They'll hang, every last one of them. Thornton's expression was granite hard. This territory's been plagued by corruption and violence long enough. It ends now. Clara felt herself beginning to slide toward the ground, her legs finally giving out. Jack caught her instantly, scooping her up despite his own wounds. She needs a doctor, Jack said urgently. She's lost too much blood. My men brought a medical kit. We'll patch her up enough to travel, then get her to Cheyenne. There's a good surgeon there, studied back east. Thornton gestured to one of his men. Help Mr. McAllister get her somewhere comfortable, and someone see to his shoulder while you're at it. They carried Clara to a sheltered spot where one of the marshal's men, a former army medic named Peterson, examined her wounds with practiced hands. His face grew increasingly grave as he worked. The stitches have torn, Peterson said quietly to Jack, and there's some infection starting. She needs proper medical care soon, or... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Jack's hand found Clara's, his grip almost painful in its intensity. You hear that? You've got to hold on a little longer, just a little longer, until we get you to Cheyenne. Clara tried to respond, but exhaustion and blood loss had finally caught up with her. The world was fading, sounds becoming distant and dreamlike. She felt hands working on her side, felt the familiar burn of whiskey on the wound, but it all seemed to be happening to someone else, someone far away. Clara, Jack's voice pulled her back, anchoring her. Stay with me. You hear? Stay with me. Those words again, her lifeline, her promise, her reason to keep fighting. Trying, she whispered. So tired, Jack. I know, but you can't give up now. We've come too far. Jack's voice was rough with emotion. You've got to testify, got to see Gaines pay for what he did. And after that, there's a ranch that could use a woman's touch again. Books that need reading, horses that need naming, a future that needs building. Clara's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Jack's face with effort. Are you asking? I'm asking you to live. Everything else we can figure out later. But his eyes held a promise, a possibility that made Clara's heart ache with unexpected hope. All right, she breathed. All right, I'll stay. For you, for the future, for all of it. That's my girl. Jack pressed his forehead to hers briefly, gently. That's my brave girl. Peterson finished his work and stepped back. Best I can do out here, but she needs rest, fluids, and professional care within 24 hours, or we're going to lose her. Then we ride for Cheyenne now, Thornton said decisively. McAllister, can you travel? I can do whatever needs doing. Good man. Thornton began issuing orders, organizing his men and the surviving ranchers. Hank, you and your boys see to your wounded and your dead. Give them proper burial, proper honor. I'll send word to the territorial governor about compensation for your losses and recognition of your service. The rest of you, we're riding hard for Cheyenne. Anyone who can't keep up, speak now. No one spoke. They fashioned a travois for Clara, a makeshift stretcher pulled behind one of the horses. It was rough transport, but gentler than making her ride. Jack insisted on leading the horse himself, staying close enough to monitor her condition. As they prepared to move out, Hank approached Jack and Clara, his hat in his hands. Jack, I want you to know what you did here today, standing up to that gang, protecting Miss Whitfield, organizing all of us. That took courage, real courage. We all showed courage today, Jack replied, and we paid for it in blood. I'm sorry about your men, Hank. They knew what they were fighting for. Home, family, justice. Those are things worth dying for. Hank glanced at Clara. You take care of her, Jack. She's earned her place in this territory. I intend to. The ride to Cheyenne began as the sun reached its zenith, turning the landscape harsh and bright. Clara drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of movement, of Jack's voice speaking low and steady, of Peterson checking on her periodically. Time became fluid, meaningless. She surfaced once to find night had fallen, stars blazing overhead in impossible profusion. Jack rode beside the travois, his face exhausted but vigilant. "How long?" Clara managed to ask. 12 hours to Cheyenne if we don't stop," Jack replied. "Can you make it?" "Have to." Clara's hand found his in the darkness. "Jack, if something happens, promise me you'll testify. Tell them everything. Make sure Gaines and the others pay. Nothing's going to happen. Promise me anyway." Jack's hand tightened on hers. "I promise. But you're going to be fine. You're going to live to see Gaines hang, and after that you're going to help me rebuild that ranch into something Sarah would have been proud of. You hear me? You're not dying, Clara Whitfield. I won't allow it." Clara managed a faint smile. "Giving me orders now?" "Someone has to. You're too stubborn to know when to quit." But Jack's voice was gentle, affectionate even. "So I'm making it in order. You live, you heal, and when you're strong again, we'll figure out what comes next. Together." "Together," Clara echoed, the word a promise and a prayer. Then sleep claimed her again, pulling her down into darkness where pain couldn't quite follow. She woke to morning light and the sound of a city. Buildings rose around her, more structures than she'd seen since leaving Kansas. People moved along wooden sidewalks, their faces curious as the marshal's party rode past. A sign proclaimed, "Cheyenne, Territorial Capital." They'd made it. "Stay with me," Jack murmured, seeing her stir. "Just a little farther. The surgeon's office is 2 blocks ahead." Those blocks felt like miles, but finally they stopped before a neat brick building with a sign reading, "Dr. Margaret Hayes, Physician and Surgeon." A woman, Clara registered surprise even through her haze, stepped out, taking in the bloodied, exhausted group with a practiced eye. "Marshal Thornton," Dr. Hayes said briskly. "What have you brought me this time?" "Gunshot wound, 3 days old, infection setting in. She's tough, but she needs your help." "Then let's not waste time. Bring her inside." Dr. Hayes's gaze fell on Jack. "You're wounded too, Cowboy. I'll see to you after." "See to her first," Jack said flatly. "I can wait." They carried Clara into a clean, bright examination room. The last thing she saw before the doctor administered chloroform was Jack's face hovering above her, his eyes fierce with determination. "Stay with me," he whispered one more time, and Clara, sliding into medicinal darkness, thought, "Always." Clara woke to whiteness, white walls, white sheets, white curtains filtering afternoon sunlight. For a moment she thought she'd died, that this was some kind of heaven. Then pain reminded her she was very much alive, and awareness returned in a rush. "Easy." A woman's voice, calm and professional. Dr. Hayes appeared at her bedside, placing cool fingers on Clara's wrist to check her pulse. "You're in my surgery. You've been here for 2 days. How do you feel?" "Like I was shot and dragged across Wyoming territory," Clara managed, her voice hoarse. "Accurate assessment." Dr. Hayes smiled slightly. "You had a severe infection. I had to reopen and clean the wound, remove some necrotic tissue, but you're through the worst of it now. Young, strong constitution. That saved you. Jack, Mr. McAllister, is fine. Took a bullet through the shoulder, but it was clean. No bone damage. I patched him up and sent him to rest at the hotel." Dr. Hayes's expression softened. "He sat outside this room for 36 hours straight. Wouldn't leave until I threatened to have the marshal arrest him for disturbing my patients. Even then, he only agreed to go if I promised to send word the instant you woke." Warmth flooded through Clara at the image. He's been through too much already. He's been through what he chose to go through. And from what the marshal tells me, you wouldn't be alive if not for him. Dr. Hayes checked Clara's bandages with efficient hands. "The marshal wants to take your statement when you're strong enough. The trial against Edward Gaines and his accomplices begins in 4 days. Your testimony is crucial. I'll be ready. You'll rest for at least 2 more days before I even consider letting you out of bed. The trial can wait if necessary. Gaines isn't going anywhere. The territorial governor himself has taken an interest in the case. Apparently your documents expose corruption at the highest levels." Over the next days, Clara healed and learned the full scope of what her discovery had unleashed. Edward Gaines had been arrested trying to flee to California. his saddlebag stuffed with embezzled cash. Mayor Tinsdale had confessed everything, hoping for leniency. Judge Blackburn had been found dead in his chambers, an apparent suicide. The documents Clara had risked everything to preserve had shattered an entire network of corruption. Banks in 3 territories were being investigated. Politicians were resigning in disgrace. And at the center of it all was Edward Gaines, who'd thought himself untouchable until a woman he'd underestimated had brought his entire empire crashing down. Jack visited daily, bringing flowers he'd obviously purchased with no idea what he was doing. Mismatched blooms that clashed terribly but touched Clara's heart more than any perfect bouquet could have. He'd sit beside her bed and tell her about the ranch, about his plans to expand the horse breeding operation, about the cabin repairs he'd been putting off for years. "You're assuming I'm coming back to your ranch," Clara said on the 3rd day, trying to sound stern despite the smile tugging at her lips. Jack's expression was serious, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "I'm hoping you will, but if you want to go back to banking or move to a city or anything else, I'll understand. You don't owe me anything, Clara. You're free to choose your own path." "And if my path leads to a remote cabin in Wyoming territory?" Clara asked softly. "If I choose a man who's shown me more honor and courage in 4 days than my fiancé showed in 6 months? What then?" Jack's hand found hers, rough and warm and steady. "Then I'd count myself the luckiest man alive. But Clara, you need to be sure. Ranch life is hard, lonely."
"You'd be giving up opportunities. I'd be gaining a future worth having." Clara squeezed his hand.
"With a man worth having it with. If you're asking, Jack McAllister, my answer is yes." Jack's face transformed, years of loneliness and loss giving way to tentative hope. "I'm asking, when you're healed, when the trial's over, when you've had time to think clearly. I'm asking." "Then I accept." Clara smiled through sudden tears. "On one condition." "Name it." "We plant aspens around the cabin near the graves, so Sarah and Emma can watch us build something new. They should be part of it too." Jack's eyes glistened, his throat working as he swallowed hard emotion. "She would have liked you, Sarah. She would have said you were too good for a rough rancher, but she would have been glad I found you. I found you too, in a creek, bleeding and half dead, but I found you." They sat together in comfortable silence, hands intertwined until Dr. Hayes bustled in to shoo Jack away and check Clara's dressings. But the promise hung between them now, solid and real, a future neither had dared hope for a week ago. The trial began 4 days later, with Clara testifying from a wheelchair Dr. Hayes insisted on despite her protests. The courtroom was packed, people standing 3 deep along the walls. Edward Gaines sat at the defendant's table, his handsome face twisted with contempt as Clara entered. "Miss Whitfield," the prosecutor began gently, "please tell the court how you discovered Mr. Gaines's embezzlement." Clara told it all, finding the hidden ledger, copying the entries, realizing the scope of the theft. She described the bank robbery, the pursuit, being shot as she fled, and she described Jack's rescue, his protection, the battle at Coleman's Pass. When she produced the documents, now properly filed as evidence, a collective gasp went through the courtroom. The amounts were staggering, the evidence irrefutable. Edward Gaines's face went from contemptuous to pale as he realized his carefully constructed empire of lies was collapsing around him. During cross-examination, Gaines's lawyer tried to paint Clara as a vengeful former fiancé, as someone who'd forged the documents out of spite. But when Marshal Thornton testified about his independent investigation that corroborated every detail, that argument fell apart. The trial lasted 3 days. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Edward Gaines stood to receive his sentence with his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on some point beyond the judge's head. Judge Morrison, brought in from Denver to ensure impartiality, showed no mercy. "Edward Gaines, you have betrayed every trust placed in you. You have stolen from hard-working people, corrupted public officials, and allied yourself with murderers. You have shown no remorse, no recognition of the harm you've caused. Therefore, I sentence you to 20 years hard labor at the territorial prison. May you use that time to contemplate the cost of your greed. When Gaines was led away in chains, he passed within feet of Clara. For just a moment, their eyes met, and Clara saw not contempt but something else. Fear, perhaps, or regret. But whatever it was came too late to matter. "It's over," Jack said softly, appearing at her side as the courtroom emptied. "Truly over." "Not quite." Clara looked up at him. "There's still one thing left to do." 2 weeks later, after Dr. Hayes had declared her healed enough to travel, Clara and Jack returned to his ranch. The valley looked exactly as Clara remembered, peaceful, isolated, beautiful in its simplicity. But now she saw it differently, saw it as home. They planted aspens the next day, choosing a spot near the hilltop graves where Sarah and Emma rested. Jack dug while Clara supervised, still not strong enough for hard labor. As each tree went into the ground, Jack would tell a story about Sarah's love of their rustling leaves, about Emma's attempts to climb them despite being too small, about dreams of the future these trees represented. "They'll grow tall," Clara said, watching the last sapling settle into place. "Years from now, this whole hillside will be covered with aspens." "Years from now," Jack repeated, turning to face her. "Clara, I know we haven't known each other long. I know you've been through trauma and you might feel differently once the shock wears off. But I need to say this now, while I've got the courage." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, worn, well-loved, clearly old. "This was my mother's ring. Gave it to Sarah when I proposed. I'd be honored if you'd wear it now. If you'll marry me, build a life with me, help me turn this ranch into something worth having." Clara took the box with trembling hands, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a small emerald. It was beautiful, not for its value, but for what it represented: generations of love, of family, of promises kept. "Jack McAllister," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "I will marry you, I will build a life with you, and I will love you as fiercely as you've protected me." Jack slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Then he kissed her, gentle at first, mindful of her still healing wounds, then deeper as she pressed into him. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I can't promise it'll be easy. Ranch life is hard, and I'm set in my ways, and there'll be times you wonder why you said yes to a stubborn cowboy. I said yes because you saved my life, because you stood up to a gang when you could have walked away, because you see me as strong, not fragile." Clara's hand cupped his weathered face. "I said yes because when I was bleeding and broken and certain I'd die, you kept telling me to stay with you, and I want to stay with you, Jack, for all the years we have left." "Stay with me," Jack whispered, the words that had become their vow, their promise, their foundation. "Always." "Always," Clara agreed. They stood together on the hillside as the sun set, two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and chosen to build something better. Below them, the ranch waited. Work to be done, dreams to be realized, a future to be written together. And all around them, the young aspens rustled in the evening breeze, their leaves whispering promises of growth and life and love that would endure. The wedding took place on a crisp October morning, 6 weeks after the trial ended. Clara stood in the small church in Redemption Creek wearing a simple cream-colored dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew, her hands steady as she spoke vows that meant more than any elaborate ceremony could have conveyed. Jack's voice was rough with emotion as he promised to love and protect her, to stand beside her through whatever hardships the frontier threw at them. When the circuit preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering of ranchers and townspeople erupted in genuine celebration. These were people who'd fought alongside them, who'd risked everything to stand against corruption and violence. Hank Devlin clasped Jack's shoulder afterward, his weathered face creasing with a rare smile. "Never thought I'd see you take another wife, Jack, but this one's a fighter. She'll do right by you." "She already has," Jack replied, his eyes finding Clara across the room where she was accepting congratulations from Mrs. Chen and Dr. Hayes, who'd made the journey from Cheyenne specifically for the occasion. The reception was held at Hank's ranch, the largest spread in the area, with tables laden with food the neighboring families had contributed. It wasn't fancy by city standards, but the generosity behind every dish, every handshake, every raised glass told Clara she'd found more than a husband. She'd found a community willing to accept her as one of their own. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Jack pulled Clara aside, away from the celebration. "Ready to go home, Mrs. McAllister?" The name still felt new, strange, and wonderful in equal measure. "I've been ready since the moment you found me in that creek." They rode back to the cabin as twilight painted the valley in shades of purple and gold, the same route they'd taken that desperate day weeks ago when Clara had been bleeding and broken. But now she sat upright in the saddle, her wound healed to a tender scar, her strength returned. Now she rode toward a future instead of away from death. The cabin glowed with lamplight as they approached. Jack had spent the past week preparing for this moment, cleaning every surface, stocking the shelves with supplies, even hanging curtains in the windows at Mrs. Chen's insistence. It was still simple, still rough around the edges, but it was home. Jack dismounted and helped Clara down, then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. "Tradition," he explained, carrying her across the threshold. "Sarah insisted on it, even though I told her it was foolish. Turned out to be one of my favorite memories." He set Clara down gently in front of the fireplace, which crackled with fresh-laid wood. For a moment they simply stood there, the weight of everything they'd been through settling around them like a comfortable blanket. "I keep thinking I'll wake up," Clara said softly. "That this is all a fever dream, that I'm still bleeding in that creek waiting to die. You're awake, you're alive, and you're mine, if you'll have me." Jack's hands found her waist, pulling her close. "Though I'm still not entirely sure what you see in a rough rancher with more scars than sense. I see a man who kept telling me to stay when everything in me wanted to give up. I see someone who risked everything to protect a stranger, who fought a gang to defend what's right, who loved so deeply once that he thought he'd never love again." Clara's fingers traced the line of his jaw. "I see my husband, and that's more than enough." Jack kissed her then, deep and thorough, all the restrained desire of the past weeks finally unleashed. Clara responded with equal hunger, her hand sliding beneath his shirt to find the warm skin beneath. They made their way to the bed. Their bed now, shedding clothes and inhibitions, two people who'd earned the right to this intimacy through blood and courage and unwavering trust. Later, as they lay tangled together beneath the quilts, Jack's fingers traced the scar on Clara's side with infinite gentleness. "Does it still hurt?" "Sometimes. Dr. Hayes says it always will, a little, but it's a good hurt. Reminds me I survived, that I'm stronger than I thought." Clara caught his hand, pressed it against the scar. "It reminds me of you, actually, of your voice telling me to stay with you when staying seemed impossible. I was terrified I'd lose you. When you fell from that horse in the pass, when I saw how much blood you'd lost." Jack's voice went rough. "I've lost too many people I cared about. Couldn't stand the thought of losing you too." "You didn't lose me. You saved me." Clara shifted to face him fully, her eyes serious in the lamplight. "And now we get to figure out what comes next. Together." What came next, it turned out, was harder than either of them had anticipated. The romance of their dramatic courtship gave way to the grinding reality of ranch life as winter approached. There were horses to tend, cattle to move to winter pasture, fences to mend before the first snow. Clara threw herself into the work with determination, learning skills she'd never needed as a bank teller: how to milk a cow, how to churn butter, how to preserve vegetables for the long months ahead. Jack was patient but exacting, understanding that Clara's pride wouldn't accept being coddled, but insisting she learn things properly. "Out here, mistakes can kill you," he'd say, demonstrating for the third time how to properly secure a saddle. "I need to know you can handle things if something happens to me." "But nothing's going to happen to you," Clara would reply. But she paid attention anyway, understanding that self-sufficiency wasn't just pride on the frontier, it was survival. 3 weeks into their marriage, the first real test came. Jack was working on the roof, replacing shingles damaged in a windstorm, when his foot slipped. He fell 12 feet, landing hard on his shoulder, the same shoulder that had taken a bullet at Coleman's Pass. Clara heard his shout and came running from the barn, her heart in her throat. Jack lay on the ground, his face gray with pain, his arm bent at an unnatural angle. "Dislocated," he managed through gritted teeth. "Need you to put it back." "I don't know how." "You have to. Can't ride to get help like this, and it'll get worse the longer we wait." Jack talked her through it, his voice steady despite the agony etched on his face. Grab my wrist, brace your foot against my ribs. When I count 3, pull hard and rotate. Clara's hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip him. The thought of causing him more pain made her stomach turn, but Jack's eyes held hers, calm and trusting. You can do this, Clara. I know you can. On 3. 1, 2. She pulled on 2 before her courage could fail. The shoulder made a sickening pop as it slid back into place. Jack's scream echoed across the valley, sending birds erupting from nearby trees. Then he slumped back, breathing hard, sweat beading his forehead. That's my girl, he whispered. Knew you had it in you. Clara sat beside him, trembling with reaction. I hurt you. I made it worse. You fixed it. There's a difference. Jack caught her hand with his good one. Out here, we do what needs doing, even when it hurts. You just proved you can handle it. That night, as Clara tended his bruised and swollen shoulder with compresses and the medical supplies doctor Hayes had sent home with them, she understood something fundamental about their new life. It wasn't going to be like the dramatic rescue and passionate romance of those first days. It was going to be harder, quieter, filled with small crises and daily challenges that required grit more than heroism. But as she settled beside Jack in their bed, listening to his breathing even out into sleep despite the pain, Clara realized she wouldn't trade it for anything. This was real. This was partnership. This was building something that would last. The first snow came in mid-November, 3 inches overnight that transformed the valley into a wonderland. Clara woke to find Jack already up, stoking the fire to chase away the morning chill. Beautiful, isn't it? He said, nodding toward the window where sunlight glinted off pristine white. Terrifying, you mean? How do we manage with all this snow? Carefully, and together. Jack poured coffee, strong and black, and they sat at the table planning the day's work. The chickens would need extra feed. The horses required fresh water from the creek before it froze solid, and they'd need to bring several loads of firewood closer to the cabin while they could still navigate the paths. It became their routine. Mornings spent planning, days spent working side by side, evenings by the fire, where Jack would read aloud from his collection of books, while Clara mended clothes or prepared meals. Sometimes Hank or other neighbors would stop by, bringing news from town or checking to ensure the newlyweds had weathered the latest storm. But mostly they were alone, just the two of them, and the animals, learning each other's rhythms and habits. Clara discovered that Jack sang while he worked, off-key but enthusiastic, usually old army songs with lyrics that made her blush. Jack learned that Clara talked to the horses, carrying on elaborate conversations with them about everything from the weather to politics. These small intimacies, unremarkable in themselves, wove them together more tightly than any grand gesture could have. But the specter of what they'd been through wouldn't quite leave them alone. Clara still woke sometimes in the night, gasping from dreams where Edward Gaines stood over her with a gun, where the Blackwell gang caught her in an endless canyon, where she bled out in Jack's arms despite his desperate pleas to stay. On those nights, Jack would hold her, his solid presence anchoring her until the nightmares faded and reality reasserted itself. And Jack had his own demons. One morning, Clara found him standing on the hill where Sarah and Emma were buried, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She approached quietly, slipping her hand into his. Some days it hits harder than others, Jack said roughly. Especially with you here, making this place feel alive again. Part of me feels guilty, like I'm betraying them by being happy. You're not betraying anyone. You're living, which is what Sarah told you to do. Clara squeezed his hand. They're part of us now, Jack. Part of our story. We'll teach our children about them, tell them how brave their father was, how much he loved. They'll never be forgotten. Our children. Jack turned to look at her, something hopeful and vulnerable in his expression. You want that? Children? I want a life with you. If children are part of that, then yes, and Clara smiled softly. Though I admit I'm terrified of the prospect. Childbirth out here, miles from a doctor. We'll manage. Women have been having babies on the frontier since the first wagon rolled west, and Dr. Hayes said she'd come when the time came, if we sent word. Jack pulled Clara close, resting his chin on her head. But there's no rush. We've got time to figure it all out. December brought heavier snows and a cold snap that froze the creek solid. Jack had to break the ice twice daily so the animals could drink, his hands raw and chapped despite the gloves Clara had knitted for him. The isolation was complete now. The trails to neighboring ranches were impassable, and they wouldn't see another person until the thaw came in spring. Clara had thought she'd hate being cut off from the world, but instead she found herself cherishing the solitude. In town, she'd always been on display. The scandalous female bank teller, the woman who'd exposed Edward Gaines, the bride who'd married so quickly after such drama. Here, she could simply be herself, could make mistakes without judgment, could learn at her own pace. She was learning to cook on the cast iron stove, though her early attempts ranged from barely edible to complete disasters. Jack ate everything without complaint, which Clara found both endearing and frustrating. "You don't have to pretend it's good," she said one evening, watching him work his way through a batch of biscuits that could have been used as weapons. "I know it's terrible. It's fuel. That's all that matters." But Jack's eyes crinkled with suppressed amusement. "Jack McAllister, if you're laughing at me, wouldn't dream of it." He was definitely laughing now. "Though I will say, your biscuits have improved considerably. These ones only broke one of my teeth." Clara threw a dish towel at him, which he caught easily, still grinning. Then she was laughing too, the absurdity of their situation suddenly hilarious. Here she was, a woman who 6 months ago had been keeping bank ledgers in pressed dresses, now struggling to make decent biscuits in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. And somehow, impossibly, she was happy. Christmas came quietly, just the two of them, and a small pine tree Jack cut and dragged back to the cabin. They had few decorations, but Clara strung popcorn garlands while Jack carved small wooden ornaments, a horse, a star, a tiny cabin. They hung them on the branches and stood back to admire their work. "Not exactly fancy," Jack observed. "It's perfect," Clara replied, meaning it absolutely. Jack's gift to her was a new rifle, lighter than his own, sized for her smaller frame. "You need to be able to protect yourself when I'm not here," he said seriously. "And you need to be able to hunt if something happens to me." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Clara said automatically, but she accepted the rifle and let him teach her to shoot, spending afternoons in the cold setting up targets and learning proper stance and aim. She proved to be a decent shot, which pleased them both. Clara's gift to Jack was a new shirt she'd sewn herself, her stitches uneven but serviceable. She'd used fabric she'd brought from town, soft flannel and deep blue that matched his eyes. Jack held it like it was made of gold, running his fingers over the careful stitches. "You made this. For me. I'm not very good at sewing yet, but I'm learning. Mrs. Chen's been teaching me through letters, though with the snow, mail hasn't been getting through." Clara bit her lip anxiously. "If you don't like it—" Jack kissed her, silencing her doubts. "I love it, and I love you." It was the first time either of them had said the words aloud, though they'd been living the reality for months. Clara felt tears prick her eyes as she replied, "I love you too, Jack McAllister. More than I thought possible." They made love in front of the fireplace that night, the Christmas tree glowing softly in the corner, and Clara thought about how strange life was, how the worst moment of her existence had led directly to the best. If Edward hadn't betrayed her, if she hadn't run, if Jack hadn't found her, she'd never have known this contentment, this deep-rooted sense of belonging. The new year arrived with a blizzard that lasted 3 days, trapping them inside the cabin. They burned through wood at an alarming rate, huddled together for warmth, telling stories to pass the time. Jack spoke of his army days, of Sarah and Emma, of dreams he'd once had of breeding horses that would be sought after across the territory. Clara told him about her father, about learning mathematics and bookkeeping, about the quiet rebellion of applying for that bank job despite knowing it would scandalize the town. "You were brave even then," Jack observed, "just in a different way." "I didn't feel brave. I felt desperate. My father's debts were suffocating me, and I needed a way to pay them off that didn't involve marrying whoever would have me." Clara smiled wryly. "Though I suppose I ended up married anyway. But on your terms, that makes all the difference." When the blizzard finally broke and they dug their way out of the cabin, the world had been transformed. Snow lay 4 feet deep in places, sculpted by wind into fantastic drifts. It took them hours to clear a path to the barn, to dig out the chicken coop, to ensure all the animals had survived the storm. Miraculously, they had, though the chickens were indignant about their confinement and the horses were restless from days without exercise. As January turned to February, Clara began to notice changes in her body. Her monthly cycle, regular as clockwork since adolescence, didn't come. Her breasts felt tender, and certain smells made her nauseated. She said nothing at first, not wanting to worry Jack with what might be false alarm. But as the weeks passed and the signs became impossible to ignore, she finally told him one evening over supper, "Jack, I believe I might be with child." Jack's fork clattered to his plate, his eyes going wide. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor. All the signs are there." Clara watched his face carefully, trying to read his reaction. "I know we said we had time, that there was no rush." "Clara!" Jack was around the table in an instant, pulling her into his arms. "This is wonderful. Terrifying, yes, but wonderful." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "A baby. Our baby." Relief flooded through Clara so intensely, her knees went weak. "I was afraid you'd think it was too soon, that we weren't ready." "We'll never be completely ready, but we'll figure it out, same as we've figured out everything else." Jack's hand settled on her still flat stomach with infinite gentleness. "A baby. God, Clara, you've given me more than I ever thought I'd have again." But the joy was tempered by practical concerns. Clara was 3 months pregnant, by her best estimate, which meant the baby would come in late summer. They'd need to send word to Dr. Hayes soon to ensure she could be there for the birth. They'd need supplies, baby clothes, a cradle, and they'd need to prepare mentally for the risk. Childbirth was dangerous even in the best circumstances, doubly so on an isolated ranch miles from help. "I won't lose you," Jack said fiercely that night as they lay in bed, his hand still resting protectively on her stomach. "I can't lose you, Clara. You and this baby, you're everything. You won't lose us. I'm strong, remember? Strong enough to survive a bullet and a gang of outlaws. I can survive childbirth." But Clara's voice held a tremor of uncertainty. She'd seen women die in childbirth, knew the statistics were grim. All her bravery, all her determination might not be enough if something went wrong. Jack must have heard the fear because he pulled her closer, his lips against her temple. "We'll get through this. Together, just like everything else." "Together," Clara echoed, letting his certainty bolster her own flagging courage. The winter began its slow retreat in March, the snow melting gradually to reveal brown grass and muddy trails. The first rider they'd seen in 4 months appeared one sunny afternoon, Hank Devlin, looking travel-worn but grinning widely. "Thought I'd better check on you newlyweds," he said, dismounting stiffly. "Make sure you hadn't killed each other out of cabin fever." "We survived," Jack replied dryly. "Though there were moments." Over coffee, they caught up on news from the territory. Edward Gaines had tried to escape from the prison work camp and been shot by guards. He'd survived, but lost the use of his right hand, which felt like a particularly fitting punishment for a man who'd stolen with a pen. The territorial governor had implemented new banking regulations inspired by Clara's case, and most surprisingly, the town of Redemption Creek was looking for a new bank manager, someone honest, competent, and trusted by the community. "They're asking for you, Clara," Hank said, watching her face carefully. "The bank board wants you to come back, take over as manager. Said you've more than proved your capabilities." Clara felt Jack tense beside her, though he said nothing. She reached for his hand under the table, squeezing gently before responding. "That's quite an offer. But I'm needed here. We're building something, Jack and I. Something that matters more to me than any bank job." "You're sure? It's good pay, respect, independence." "I have all those things already," Clara interrupted gently, "and I'm pregnant, which makes traveling back and forth impossible. Tell the board I'm honored, but my place is here." Relief flooded Jack's face, though he tried to hide it. After Hank left, he turned to Clara, his expression serious. "You didn't have to refuse on my account. If you wanted to go back to banking, I don't. I really don't." Clara cupped his face, making sure he heard the truth in her words. "I spent years in that bank, Jack, surrounded by ledgers and transactions, watching money change hands without any of it meaning anything real. Here, everything means something. The vegetables we plant, the animals we raise, the life we're building, it's all real, all tangible. Why would I give that up to sit behind another teller's window? You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Jack kissed her then, deep and grateful, and Clara knew she'd made the right choice. The town would find another bank manager, but Jack would never find another Clara, and she'd never find another place where she felt so completely herself. As spring advanced into early summer, Clara's pregnancy became visible. Her dresses had to be let out, then abandoned entirely in favor of modified versions of Jack's shirts. She moved more slowly now, her balance affected by the growing weight. But she refused to be treated as an invalid, continuing to help with chores even as Jack fretted and tried to do everything himself. I'm pregnant, not dying, Clara said for what felt like the 100th time, watching Jack insist on carrying water she could have managed herself. Women work right up until labor. I'm not going to break. Humor me, Jack replied, his eyes holding that particular intensity they got whenever her pregnancy came up. I need to feel like I'm protecting you, even if it's from things you don't need protection from. Clara softened, understanding the fear beneath his hovering. I know, but Jack, you have to trust that I'll tell you if something's wrong. And you have to let me stay active. It's better for the baby if I keep moving. They compromised, as they'd learned to do about most things. Clara continued her lighter chores, but let Jack handle anything strenuous. She worked in the garden they'd planted, tending the vegetables that would feed them through the next winter. She collected eggs, fed the chickens, even helped Jack gentle a new foal, her movements careful but confident. Dr. Hayes arrived in late June, earlier than expected, explaining that she wanted to be settled in before Clara's time came. She examined Clara thoroughly, pronounced her healthy and the baby strong, then proceeded to turn the cabin into something approximating a medical facility. First babies often take their time, Dr. Hayes said, unpacking her supplies with brisk efficiency. But I'd rather be prepared than scrambling at the last minute. Mr. McAllister, I'll need you to boil water, keep the fire going, and stay calm. Can you manage that? I can manage anything except losing them, Jack replied, his face pale but determined. Then we understand each other. The waiting was its own kind of torture. Clara felt fine, energetic even, but Dr. Hayes insisted she stay close to the cabin. The baby was due any day now, and the doctor wanted to be able to reach Clara quickly when labor started. So Clara spent her days preparing, sewing tiny gowns from soft fabric, washing and rewashing the cradle Jack had built, organizing supplies with obsessive attention. You're nesting, Dr. Hayes observed with amusement, watching Clara rearrange the baby's corner for the third time that day. It's normal. Means the baby's coming soon. How soon? Could be hours, could be days. Babies keep their own schedule. The doctor's expression softened. You're scared. That's normal too. I keep thinking about all the things that could go wrong. Hemorrhaging, the cord around the neck, the baby coming breech. Clara's voice trailed off, all the medical disasters she'd read about crowding her mind. Those things can happen, but most births go perfectly fine, especially for young, healthy women like yourself. And I've delivered over 300 babies in my career. I know what I'm doing, Clara. Trust me. Clara did trust her, but trust couldn't quite overcome the primal fear of what her body was about to endure. That night, as she lay beside Jack in the darkness, she finally voiced her deepest terror. What if I don't survive? What if something goes wrong, and you're left alone with a baby, having lost another wife? Jack was silent for a long moment, his hand finding hers in the dark. Then I'll raise our child to know how brave their mother was, how strong, how she survived being shot and chased by outlaws, but was still willing to risk everything to bring them into the world. His voice was rough with emotion. But that's not going to happen, Clara. You're going to be fine. You're going to hold our baby and be annoyed at how much work infants are, and 20 years from now we'll be sitting on this very bed watching our grandchildren play in the yard. I know it. How can you be so sure? Because I've lost too much already. The universe owes me this one thing, getting to keep you. Clara wanted to point out that the universe didn't work that way, that it didn't keep score or grant wishes, but Jack's certainty was its own kind of comfort, something solid to lean on when her own courage faltered. Labor started 3 days later, on a hot August morning when the air hung heavy and still. Clara woke to a tightening sensation across her stomach. Not quite pain, but definitely uncomfortable. She lay quietly, timing the contractions by the light growing outside the window, 10 minutes apart, then 8, then 6. Jack, she said softly, shaking his shoulder. It's time. Jack bolted upright like he'd been struck by lightning, his eyes wild. Time? Now. But I thought, should I get the doctor? Should I boil water? What do I... Breathe, Clara said, oddly calm now that the waiting was over. Go wake Dr. Hayes. Then, yes, start heating water. But slowly, carefully. We have hours yet. She was right about that. Labor progressed with agonizing slowness through the morning and into the afternoon. The contractions grew stronger, closer together, stealing Clara's breath with their intensity. Dr. Hayes examined her periodically, checked the baby's position, offered encouragement that felt increasingly hollow as the pain mounted. Jack stayed close, holding Clara's hand through each contraction, whispering the words that had sustained them both from the very beginning. Stay with me. You're doing so good. Stay with me, Clara. By evening, Clara understood why women screamed during childbirth. The pain was beyond anything she'd imagined, beyond the bullet wound, beyond every hardship she'd endured. It consumed her entirely, leaving no room for thought or reason, only the overwhelming need to push, to get this baby out, to make it stop. Almost there, Dr. Hayes said from between Clara's knees, her voice calm and professional. One more push, Clara. One more good one. Clara bore down with everything she had left, a scream tearing from her throat. Then suddenly, blessedly, relief. The pressure released, the pain receding to something manageable. And in the sudden quiet, a new sound filled the cabin. A baby's cry, strong and indignant. You have a daughter, Dr. Hayes announced, holding up a tiny, red-faced creature covered in blood and vernix. A healthy, beautiful daughter. Jack was crying, Clara realized dimly, tears streaming down his weathered face as the doctor placed the baby on Clara's chest. The infant was impossibly small, impossibly perfect, her tiny fists waving as she protested this strange new world. Hello, little one, Clara whispered, exhaustion and wonder warring in her voice. We've been waiting for you. The baby quieted at Clara's voice, her unfocused eyes seeming to search for the source of the sound. One tiny hand found Clara's finger and gripped it with surprising strength, and Clara felt something shift in her chest, a fierce, protective love, unlike anything she'd known before. She's perfect, Jack breathed, his hand hovering uncertainly before finally settling on the baby's back. She's absolutely perfect. She's loud, Dr. Hayes said dryly, though her eyes were warm. And she's got a good set of lungs, which is excellent. Now let's get you cleaned up and comfortable, Clara, and then you can really get to know your daughter. The next hours passed in a blur of exhaustion and elation. Dr. Hayes tended to Clara, stitched what needed stitching, checked for complications. The baby nursed for the first time, her tiny mouth finding Clara's breast with instinctive hunger. Jack sat beside them, his eyes never leaving his daughter's face, one hand gently stroking her downy dark hair. What should we call her? Clara asked, watching her daughter's eyelids flutter closed as she drifted into satisfied sleep. Jack was quiet for a moment, then said softly, I was thinking, Emma Grace. Emma for my daughter who never got to grow up. Grace because that's what you've given me. A second chance I don't deserve. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Emma Grace McAllister. It's perfect. You don't mind using Emma's name? I think it's beautiful. It honors your past while celebrating our future. Clara looked down at the sleeping baby. Hello, Emma Grace. You're named for a brave little girl who came before you. You've got a lot to live up to. Dr. Hayes left a week later, satisfied that both mother and baby were thriving. Before she departed, she pulled Clara aside, her expression serious. You did remarkably well, but I need to be honest with you. The tearing was significant. Another pregnancy might be dangerous. You should wait at least 2 years before trying again, if you decide to have more children at all. The warning sobered Clara, but didn't devastate her. She had Emma now, perfect and healthy. And she had Jack, who'd proved himself not just a rescuer, but a true partner. If Emma was their only child, that would be enough. The late summer days took on a new rhythm now.
dictated entirely by Emma's needs. Clara learned to function on scattered fragments of sleep, to nurse while eating breakfast, to recognize the different types of cries that meant hungry or tired or simply wanting to be held. Jack proved to be a natural father, rising for night feedings even though he couldn't nurse, walking the floors with Emma when she was fussy, singing his off-key army songs that somehow soothed her when nothing else would. "You're good at this," Clara observed one evening, watching Jack change Emma's diaper with practiced efficiency. "I've had practice." Emma, the first Emma. She went through a phase where she'd only sleep if I was holding her. Sarah would hand her over and collapse for a few hours while I paced the floor. The memory brought both pain and warmth to his face. I'm glad I get to do it again. To do it right this time, without the fear of losing them. But the fear wasn't entirely gone. Clara caught Jack sometimes standing over Emma's cradle at night, his hand hovering near her chest to ensure she was still breathing. She understood the impulse, had done the same thing herself more than once. They'd both lost too much to take any moment of happiness for granted. September brought an unexpected visitor. A courier arrived from Cheyenne bearing an official-looking document sealed with the territorial governor's stamp. Jack opened it with trepidation, then his eyes widened as he read. "It's a commendation," he said slowly, "from the governor himself, for our role in exposing corruption and bringing the Blackwell gang to justice. There's money too, $500 as a reward." "That's a fortune," Clara breathed. $500 could expand the ranch significantly, buy breeding stock, make improvements they'd been putting off. But the letter wasn't finished. Jack kept reading, his expression growing increasingly stunned. "The governor's also granting us an additional land claim, another 160 acres adjoining our current property, in recognition of our service to the territory." Clara sat down heavily, Emma cradled against her chest. More land meant more opportunities, more security for their growing family. It meant Jack could finally pursue his dream of breeding horses on a larger scale. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it, Jack. We survived. We built something, and now we're being rewarded for it." Jack crossed to her, kneeling beside the chair so he could look into her eyes. "You did it, Clara. Your courage, your determination to expose the truth even when it nearly killed you, that's what changed everything. I just helped you stay alive long enough to see it through." "We helped each other." Clara kissed him gently. "That's how partnerships work." That night, after Emma was asleep and the cabin was quiet, they made love with a tenderness that spoke of everything they'd been through together. It was different from the desperate passion of their early days, different from the comfortable intimacy they'd developed over months of marriage. This was deeper, richer, weighted with the knowledge of how easily they could have lost each other, how precious each moment together truly was. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Jack's hand traced patterns on Clara's back while she drowsed against his chest. "Do you ever regret it?" Jack asked quietly. "Giving up the bank job, the town life, everything you might have had?" Clara lifted her head to meet his eyes. "Every decision has costs. I gave up financial independence, intellectual stimulation, the pride of being the first woman bank manager. But I gained something more valuable. A partner who sees me as an equal, a home I helped build, a daughter I'm raising to be brave and strong. And I gained you, Jack McAllister. Why would I regret any of that? I just want you to be happy." "I am happy, exhausted, covered in spit-up, with hands rough from work I never imagined doing, but happy." Clara smiled. "This is the life I choose every single day, and I'd choose it again in a heartbeat." Jack pulled her close, his heart steady beneath her ear. "Stay with me," he whispered, the old words taking on new meaning after everything they'd been through. "Always," Claire replied, the promise as solid and certain as the ground beneath their cabin, as the mountains surrounding their valley, as the love that had survived bullets and betrayal and every hardship the frontier could throw at them. They'd built something worth keeping, and Clara knew with bone-deep certainty that they were just beginning. Emma was 3 months old when the first real trouble came knocking. Clara was hanging laundry on the line behind the cabin, the baby strapped to her chest in a carrier Jack had fashioned from canvas and leather, when she noticed riders approaching from the south. 3 men, moving with the deliberate pace of people who knew exactly where they were going. Her hand dropped instinctively to the pistol at her hip. She never went unarmed now, not even for simple chores.
Jack was in the north pasture mending fence, too far away to call without alerting the riders that she was concerned. Clara continued hanging close, her movements casual while her mind raced through possibilities. The riders drew closer, and Clara's heart sank as she recognized the lead man. Silas Blackwell, Thomas's younger brother, wearing the same cold expression that had haunted her nightmares for months. Behind him rode two men she didn't know, but their tied-down holsters and watchful eyes marked them as professionals. "Mrs. McAllister," Silas said, reining in his horse 20 feet from the cabin. His voice was cultured, almost pleasant, which made it more threatening somehow. "Or should I say Miss Whitfield? I understand congratulations are in order. Marriage and a baby, all in less than a year." Clara's hand settled on Emma's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of the baby's breathing. "My name is Clara McAllister, and you're trespassing on private property. Just came to have a conversation, woman to man, so to speak." Silas dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. His companion stayed mounted, positioned to cut off any escape route. "You see, Mrs. McAllister, your testimony put my brother in the ground. Your documents destroyed an operation that took years to build. And while I understand you thought you were doing the right thing, actions have consequences. Your brother robbed banks and killed innocent people. The consequences were his own doing. Perhaps. But you could have walked away, could have kept your head down, married Gaines, lived a comfortable life. Instead, you chose to be a hero." Silas's smile didn't reach his eyes. Heroes tend to die young on the frontier. Clara's fingers wrapped around her pistol grip, though she didn't draw. "Is that a threat?" "Call it friendly advice. See, I don't blame you for what happened. You were just doing what you thought was right. But there are people, investors, partners, folks who lost money when the operation collapsed, who aren't as forgiving as me. They want compensation, or failing that, revenge. Then they can take it up with the territorial courts." "Courts," Silas laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet morning air. "You still believe in courts and laws? After everything you've seen, everything you've been through, Mrs. McAllister, the law only matters to people who have enough money to buy it. And right now, you've made some very wealthy people very angry." Emma stirred against Clara's chest, making small, fussy sounds. Clara rocked gently, soothing the baby while keeping her eyes locked on Silas. "What do you want?" "Information. There were other documents, weren't there? Documents you didn't turn over to the marshal. Insurance, in case things went wrong. I want to know where they are." Clara's mind raced. There were no other documents. She'd given Marshal Thornton everything, but admitting that would remove any leverage she might have. "And if I knew where such documents were, what would you offer in exchange?" "Your life. Your husband's life. Your daughter's life." Silas's voice dropped to something cold and flat. "I leave here empty-handed. Those things aren't guaranteed. You understand me?" Before Clara could respond, a rifle shot cracked across the valley. Dirt kicked up inches from Silas's boot. Every man tensed, hands moving toward weapons. "Next one goes through somebody's skull," Jack's voice called from the barn loft, where he must have spotted the riders and circled back unseen. "Lady said you're trespassing. Time to leave." Silas's jaw tightened, but he raised his hands carefully, showing he wasn't going for his gun. "This isn't over, McAllister. I came here peaceful, offering a business transaction, but there are others who won't be so polite." "Then they'll get the same reception you're getting. Now mount up and ride out, before my finger slips." The three men climbed back on their horses with deliberate slowness, none of them willing to make a move that might provoke Jack to fire. But as Silas turned his mount, he looked directly at Clara, his meaning clear. This was just the beginning. They waited until the riders disappeared over the ridge before Jack climbed down from the loft, his face pale beneath its tan. "You all right? Did they touch you?" "We're fine. But Jack, this is bad. If Silas Blackwell is making threats, then we deal with it the same way we've dealt with everything else. Together." Jack checked Emma, running gentle fingers over her downy head as if reassuring himself she was unharmed. "But we need to be smarter about security. Can't have you alone out here where anyone could ride up. I'm not cowering inside the cabin for the rest of my life. Not asking you to cower, asking you to be cautious." Jack's voice was tight with barely controlled fear. "Clara, they threatened Emma, our daughter. If anything happened to her because I wasn't careful enough, Clara caught his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Nothing is going to happen to her, or to me, or to you. We survived worse than Silas Blackwell and his empty threats. Thomas Blackwell's threats weren't empty. Thomas Blackwell is dead, and Silas doesn't have half his brother's courage. He came here with hired guns because he knew he couldn't take us alone. Clara's voice was firm, certain. We're not running, and we're not hiding. This is our home. We defend it. Jack pulled her close, careful not to crush Emma between them. When did you get so damn fierce? I learned from a stubborn cowboy who once told me that fear just means you're alive. Clara smiled against his chest. Besides, I've got too much to protect now to be anything but fierce. That night, they made plans. Jack would ride to Hank's ranch at first light, warn the neighbors about Silas's appearance, organize a watch system so no ranch would be left vulnerable. Clara would write to Marshal Thornton, inform him of the threat, see if federal protection might be available. And they'd fortify the cabin, additional locks, better sight lines, supplies cached in case of siege. It felt like preparing for war, which Clara supposed it was. A different kind of war than the ambush at Coleman's Pass, fought with intimidation and fear instead of bullets. But war, nonetheless. The marshal's reply came 2 weeks later, carried by the same courier who delivered the governor's commendation. Thornton's letter was apologetic but clear. With Thomas Blackwell dead and the gang scattered, federal resources had been redirected elsewhere. Unless Silas made an overt move, there was little the law could do about implied threats and veiled warnings. We're on our own, Clara said, folding the letter with steady hands. Expected as much, but it would have been nice to be wrong. Jack was cleaning his rifle, a task he performed daily now with meticulous care. We've been on our own before. Worked out all right. Jack, this is different. Last time we knew where the threat was coming from, when it would arrive. This time, Clara trailed off, gesturing at the peaceful valley visible through the window. They could come any time, or never. We'll spend our lives looking over our shoulders. Then we look over our shoulders. It's not the life I wanted for us, but it's the life we've got. Jack set the rifle aside and crossed to where Clara sat nursing Emma. I won't apologize for protecting you. Won't apologize for doing what was right, even if it brought consequences. I'm not asking you to apologize. Clara looked down at Emma, who nursed contentedly, oblivious to the dangers surrounding her. I want better for her. Want her to grow up without fear. Then we give her that. We make this valley so safe, so protected, that fear never touches her. Jack's hand settled on Emma's back. And if that means I sleep light and carry a gun everywhere, so be it. She's worth it. You're both worth it. Winter came early that year, snow falling in October and lasting through April. The isolation was even more complete than the previous year, but this time it felt less like sanctuary and more like siege. Every rider approaching the cabin sent them into defensive positions. Every unfamiliar sound at night had Jack reaching for weapons. They were living on a knife's edge, waiting for a blow that never quite fell. Emma grew despite the tension, hitting milestones that brought joy even in the midst of vigilance. She rolled over at 4 months, sat up at 6, began babbling consonants that might have been words. Jack was besotted with her, spending every free moment playing peekaboo or making her laugh with silly faces. Watching him with their daughter, Clara could see the father he'd been before tragedy struck, could imagine the man he might have been if life hadn't been so cruel. She has your stubbornness, Jack observed one evening, watching Emma repeatedly pull herself toward a toy just out of reach instead of crying for help. Look at that determination. She's going to be trouble when she's older. She gets that from both of us, Clara replied, amused. Though I prefer to call it persistence. Call it whatever you want. Still means she's going to give us gray hair before she's 5. Spring thaw brought Hank Devlin with news from town. He looked grim as he accepted coffee, his weathered hands wrapped around the cup for warmth despite the season. There's been talk, Hank said without preamble. Men asking questions about you and Jack. Strangers, paying too well for information. The shopkeeper's wife told them where your ranch was. I'm sorry, Clara. She didn't know better. What kind of men? Jack's voice was carefully neutral, but Clara could see the tension in his shoulders. Professional types. Not cowboys or drifters. Men with money and purpose. Hank met Jack's eyes steadily. I think Silas Blackwell's making his move, finally getting around to that revenge he promised. Clara felt ice form in her stomach. When? Can't say for sure. But if I were you, I'd assume soon. Maybe wait for the passes to clear completely so they can bring more men. Hank glanced at Emma, who was playing with wooden blocks on a blanket. You should consider leaving, taking your family somewhere safe until this blows over. This is our home, Jack said flatly. We're not running. Jack, be reasonable. They're not going to come at you fair. They'll burn you out, or bushwhack you in the pasture, or poison your water. You've got a wife and baby to think about now. Which is exactly why I won't run. Start running. You never stop. They'll chase us from town to town, territory to territory, until we're dead or broken. Jack's jaw was set in the stubborn line Clara knew too well. I'd rather make my stand here, on ground I know, defending what's mine. Then you're a fool, Hank said bluntly. A brave fool, but a fool nonetheless. Clara listened to them argue, her mind racing through possibilities. Running was tempting. They could take Emma to California, start fresh where nobody knew their names or their history. But Jack was right about one thing. Running solved nothing. The kind of men Silas employed would track them anywhere, and at least here they had the advantage of familiar territory. What if we didn't run? But we didn't just sit here waiting either, Clara said suddenly. Both men turned to look at her. What if we went to them first, ended this before it starts? You want to ride into their stronghold and what? Ask them nicely to leave us alone? Hank's tone was skeptical. I want to take away their reason for revenge. Silas thinks I have additional documents, insurance I held back. What if I give him documents, fake ones, convincing enough to satisfy him that there's nothing left to find? Jack was shaking his head before she finished. Too risky. He'd see through it. Not if we make them good enough. I worked in that bank for 2 years, Jack. I know how Edward formatted his ledgers, how he covered his tracks. I can create documents that look exactly like something he would have hidden. Clara's mind was already working through the details. We give Silas what he thinks he wants, make him believe the threat is neutralized. Then maybe he leaves us alone. And if he doesn't, if he takes your fake documents and comes after you anyway, then we're no worse off than we are now, waiting for an attack we can't predict or prevent. Clara looked at Hank. How long before these men arrive? 2 weeks, maybe 3 if the weather turns. Then we have time to prepare. Time to create documents convincing enough to fool Silas, and time to set up a meeting on neutral ground. Clara's voice was steady, but her heart raced with fear and determination. We end this, Jack. One way or another, we end it. The next 2 weeks were consumed with preparation. Clara worked on the fake documents, painstakingly recreating Edward's handwriting and formatting. She invented transactions that seemed plausible, amounts that were significant but not absurdly so. The papers needed to look like insurance, like information Edward had kept as leverage against his partners. Meanwhile, Jack and Hank organized the neighboring ranchers, not for battle this time, but for witness. They'd meet Silas in town, in broad daylight, with enough armed citizens present that violence would be suicide. Clara would hand over the documents, make it clear there were no other copies, no additional leverage. Then they'd walk away and pray it was enough. I don't like it, Jack said for the 10th time, watching Clara seal the fake documents in an envelope. Too many things could go wrong. Every plan has risks, but doing nothing guarantees we'll be looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives. Clara pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. I need you to trust me on this, Jack. Trust that I know what I'm doing. I do trust you. It's Silas I don't trust. Then trust your rifle to make sure he behaves. The meeting was set for a Saturday afternoon in Redemption Creek's main square. Clara wore her best dress, the one she'd been married in, wanting to look respectable and confident. Jack wore his Sunday clothes and a carefully neutral expression, though his hand never strayed far from the pistol at his hip. Emma they'd left with Mrs. Chen, neither of them willing to bring their daughter anywhere near potential violence. Silas was already waiting when they arrived, standing beside the fountain with 2 men flanking him. But he'd kept his word about the location. This was too public, too witnessed for overt violence. Half the town seemed to have found reasons to be in the square, and Clara recognized several of Hank's friends positioned strategically on rooftops and in doorways. "Mrs. McAllister," Silas greeted, his tone businesslike, "I'm glad you reconsidered my offer." "I didn't reconsider anything. I just decided that ending this was worth more than holding on to papers that don't benefit me." Clara pulled the envelope from her bag, holding it just out of reach. "These are the only copies. Edward's personal insurance kept separate from the main ledgers. You take them, verify they're real, and then you leave us alone. Permanently." "How do I know there aren't more copies?" "You don't. But consider, if I had more leverage, why would I be giving you this? I'm trying to protect my family, Mr. Blackwell. These papers put you and your associates at risk. I don't care about that anymore. I just want to live my life without watching every shadow for assassins." Silas studied her face, clearly trying to determine if she was lying. Clara met his gaze steadily, letting him see exhaustion and fear and determination, all true emotions, all useful for selling her story. Finally, Silas nodded and took the envelope. He opened it carefully, scanning the first few pages. Clara held her breath, praying her forgery was good enough to pass initial inspection. "These will need to be verified," Silas said slowly, "but they appear genuine. If they check out, and if nothing else surfaces, we have an accord. You stay out of our business, we stay out of yours." "Agreed." Clara extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Silas shook it. His grip was cold, brief, utterly lacking in warmth. But the gesture was binding in its own way, a truce between enemies who'd never be friends. Silas and his men rode out within the hour, and Clara felt tension she'd been carrying for months finally begin to ease. It might not last. The forgery might be discovered. The truce might fail. But for now, today, they'd bought themselves time and possibly peace. "You were magnificent," Jack said as they retrieved Emma from Mrs. Chen's. "Absolutely magnificent. I believed you, and I knew you were lying." "I learned from the best," Clara replied, cuddling Emma close and breathing in her baby smell. "You taught me that sometimes survival means doing whatever it takes, even if it's not strictly honest." "Sarah would have liked you," Jack said suddenly. "She always said I needed someone who could match me stubborn for stubborn. You'd have gotten along." It was the first time Jack had compared her to Sarah without pain shadowing his words, the first time he'd spoken of his first wife as someone Clara might have known rather than a ghost haunting their marriage. Clara felt tears prick her eyes at the acceptance implicit in the statement. "I wish I could have known her. Known Emma." And Clara adjusted the baby on her hip. "But Jack, I need to know, does it bother you that our daughter shares her name? That I'm living in her house, sleeping in her bed?" Jack pulled Clara close, wrapping his arms around both her and Emma. "Sarah's dead. Emma's dead. I'll always love them, always remember them. But you're alive, Clara. You and this little one are my present and my future. There's room in my heart for all of it, the past I treasured and the life I'm building now." Clara leaned into his embrace, feeling Emma squirm between them, and thought about how far they'd come. From bleeding stranger and reluctant rescuer to husband and wife, parents together facing down threats that would have broken weaker people. They'd survived so much: bullets and betrayal, outlaws and childbirth, winter isolation and constant danger. Surely they could survive whatever came next. The forgery held for 3 months before Clara got word it had been discovered. The message came from an unexpected source, one of Silas's associates who'd been present at the exchange in Redemption Creek. He'd ridden to the ranch alone, unarmed, waving a white cloth to signal peaceful intent. Jack almost shot him anyway, but Clara stayed his hand. "Hear him out," she said quietly. "He came alone. That means something." The man dismounted carefully, keeping his hands visible. He was older than Clara had expected, maybe 50, with silver in his hair and tired eyes. "Mrs. McAllister. Mr. McAllister. My name is William Drake. I was one of Thomas Blackwell's financial partners. I'm here to warn you, Silas knows the documents were false. He's coming for you, and he's not interested in deals anymore." "Why warn us?" Jack's rifle remained trained on Drake's chest. "What's in it for you?" "Nothing except my conscience. I got into business with the Blackwells thinking they were just moving money, facilitating transactions. Didn't realize until too late that the money came from robbery and murder. By then I was in too deep to get out." Drake's voice was heavy with regret. I tried to convince Silas to let this go, that revenge would just bring more law attention, but he's obsessed. Your wife humiliated his brother, destroyed his organization. He won't rest until you're both dead. When? Clara demanded. Soon. Days. Maybe a week. He's gathering men from 3 territories, not just hired guns, but true believers. People who hate lawmen and government and anyone who cooperates with them. Drake met her eyes steadily. This isn't going to be like the Blackwell gang at Coleman's Pass. This is going to be an army. Jack and Clara exchanged glances, entire conversations passing in that look. They couldn't fight an army, not with their small network of rancher friends. And they couldn't run, not with Emma barely a year old, not without abandoning everything they'd built.